Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. The Flash from My Hero Academia. Chapter 21. After the match, Yaoyorozu Momo refused to untie Putao and the implicated Tokiyami. In the end, All Might played again and tore apart the more than 10 layers of wire mesh that bound the two with brute force. Afterwards, Kaminari Denki and Jiro Kyoka from Group E and Sato Rikido and Kirishima Eijiro from Group F1. After that, Group B Heroes team versus Group H Villains team. All Might shouted out the name of the team he grabbed in his hand. Is it finally my turn to play? Stretching, Li Tian moved his body and grinned, then turned to look at Ojiro and asked, "So, who is our opponent in Group B?" For Group B, it's Shoto Todoroki and Shoji Mezzo. Ojiro Mashirao thought for a moment and said. As early as when the two of them were grouped together, they also introduced themselves to each other, but it's classmate Hong and classmate Shoji. Li Tian turned his head to look at the opponent on one side, with a smile on his face. In this period, if there is no Li Tian, Shoto Todoroki, who is full of firepower, is undoubtedly the first place in Class A. Even the current Bakugo may not be the opponent of Hong, but, now the knot is resolved, boom, it's impossible to fight with flame quirks. Ojiro, let's go. Li Tian greeted Ojiro, and the two walked towards the next small examination building. As the villains team, they need to rush to the side of the nuclear weapon model in advance, while the heroes team needs to start breaking in after 5 minutes. Looking at the backs of Li Tian and Ojiro, Hong and Shoji's expressions were extremely serious. I think we should discuss how to join forces against Li Tian later. Shoji Mezzo said with a mouth that resembled an arm like tentacles. No need. Hong said coldly, that man's quirks cannot be defeated by a hasty cooperation between us. Instead of making an immature plan to cooperate with someone who is not even familiar with the other quirks, it is better to fight in the first place. Just fight on your own. Although Hong's words were a bit inhumane, and his performance was very indifferent, Shoji Mezzo is not the kind of person who would care about these things. Instead, he thought about Hong's words carefully, then nodded silently and said, "Say if it makes sense, let's play by ear and help each other." He glanced at Shoji, apparently surprised by Shoji's plain answer, paused before responding lightly, "Yes." 5 minutes passed quickly, and Hong, who was guarding the door of the small building, walked slowly towards the small building when the time was up, while Shoji stood at the door without moving. This is what Hong told him in advance: as soon as he steps into the small building, he will fight with all his strength, regardless of whether he is the enemy or himself, so at the very beginning, he needs to avoid the small building for the time being, but their location is in the central hall on the 4th floor. Shoji moved the tentacles that turned into ears, then turned into mouths and said to Boom. I see. Hong responded lightly, stepping in. A gust of cold air quickly spread from the position where the foot that was not covered by ice was under. At the same time, Hong's right hand rested on the wall, and the frost spread quickly. Everything that is invisible to the eye is covered by ice and snow. In the lobby on the 4th floor of the small building, the model of nuclear weapons stands in the center of the lobby. How about it, Ojiro, you go to try your skills first, or do you want me to shoot directly? Li Tian asked casually as he felt the combat uniform on his body. Ojiro said with some hesitation. Li Tian talked to him when he was still in the monitoring room when he first formed the team, about whether he would be allowed to choose whether to fight or let Li Tian take action before the battle. As for the reason why he was asked to choose, although Ojiro felt a little unbelievable, Li Tian's original words at the time were, "I just bought a battle suit that can play at full speed, so no matter who the opponent is, I may be excited to end the battle in an instant. But, well, I'm sorry classmate Li Tian, I want to try to fight." Ojiro apologized. "I'm not sorry." Li Tian shrugged his shoulders and said, "But I can remind you in advance, that Shoto Todoroki is not a simple character, the other party's quirks and fighting qualities are definitely professional. Professional level." Ojiro was stunned for a moment, hesitated for a moment, then clenched his fists, his narrow eyes opened full of fighting intent. "I still want to try, otherwise I will never be reconciled." Well, the time is almost up. I'm afraid Hong's attack will arrive here as soon as the 5-minute time limit expires. Be careful. Li Tian nodded and said. Get here as soon as the 5-minute time limit ends. Ojiro was a little dazed. What do you mean? What does it mean to arrive here in the first time? Before Ojiro could think carefully or ask Li Tian, he heard the sound of All Might starting from the earphones. Then, frost quickly spread from their feet, and in the blink of an eye, the entire hall and even the models with nuclear weapons were covered in frost. As for Hong and Li Tian standing in the hall, they were undoubtedly frozen in place by the spreading ice. This is. Ojiro's face turned pale, looking at the ice under his feet and trying to pull his feet out. That kind of ice, if it's too hard, your feet will be seriously injured, let alone fighting, even your actions will be affected. Li Tian stood on the spot and reminded. Ojiro was stunned, but he still tried to pull it out, and he couldn't help but smile wryly when he felt that it was difficult to break free. Li Tian was right, this kind of ice that clings to the skin and freezes will definitely make him welcome severely injured legs. He's right, he was frozen by my ice. If he tries to break free, he will be seriously injured and cannot continue to move. A calm voice came from the door, and then the figure of Hong walked away from the door. Come out. However, you can definitely break free easily with your words. Hong looked at Li Tian, his eyes fixed. However, choosing to be frozen by my ice is the biggest mistake you have made, and I will not break free for you chance. As he spoke, ice cubes appeared under his feet without hesitation, pushing his body towards Li Tian, and the icy cold air kept coming out of his right hand. Student Ojiro, it looks like it's my turn to make a move next. Li Tian didn't care about the rushing bang, but turned his head to look at Ojiro and said softly. Hearing Li Tian's words, Ojiro couldn't help showing a wry smile on his face. Indeed, the level gap is too big. The other party was someone who had frozen him without even showing his face. Look, no, are you completely ignoring me? Hong's indifferent face showed a rare anger, the coldness in his hands froze, instantly turned into solid ice and stretched towards Li Tian. The solid ice turned into a continuation of the booming arm, and countless ice thorns spread and grew crazily, instantly covering Li Tian's location and freezing them all. No. Have you escaped? Hong looked at the huge empty ice, frowned slightly, and quickly turned around to lean against his own ice and became vigilant. Although his feet were frozen before, for Li Tian, although he couldn't shake his hands and feet like a high-vibration ion knife, it was still easy to shatter a layer of ice. It's really a good fighting quality. Instant judgment and execution are also top-notch. Li Tian appeared at Hong's position just now, looked at Hong with a light smile and said. That kind of guiding tone, it looks like. Hong looked at Li Tian. Densely packed ice thorns were exposed on the ice layer of the frozen small building, aiming at Li Tian in the middle to surround him. You don't regard yourself as a student at all. With the sound of bang, the countless ice thorns shot out suddenly, like 1,000 arrows. Looking at the scene in front of him, Ojiro, who was deliberately avoiding and not attacking, was stunned, and his friends in the monitoring room were also stunned. Is this going to kill people? After being surprised by Hong's strength, everyone's expressions suddenly changed. From their point of view, this kind of intensive attack with thousands of arrows, no matter how fast it is impossible to dodge it. Bar. Li Tian. Even Toru Hagakure clenched his fists at this moment, looking nervously at the screen on the monitor. Although she has great confidence in Li Tian, and is different from her classmates who just thought that Li Tian's quirks are super speed, she also knows what Li Tian's quirks are like, but she has never really experienced the world of speedsters. Just using words, Yi Yin couldn't understand what the world of that kind of speedster was like. This kind of attack, which in the eyes of ordinary people has no room to hide, for the speedster. It's too slow. Li Tian looked at the countless ice thorns densely packed all around, and a golden arc flashed in his eyes. Speed mode, expand. The golden thunder arc wrapped Li Tian's body, and in Li Tian's eyes, the whole world stopped suddenly at this moment. The ice thorns all over the sky hung in the air and slowly pierced forward. Standing in place, Hong's face still had a touch of confidence that he was sure of winning. On the side, Ojiro's face was still mostly surprised, and a hint of worry was just revealed. Stab it. Li Tian's figure was incredibly sensitive in an instant, flashing past countless ice thorns around him at various angles that were impossible for humans, and appeared behind Hong. Because the speed force only increased Li Tian's running speed, nerve reflex speed, dynamic vision, thinking speed, and movement speed by 100 times at the same time without increasing the power, Li Tian behaved like an ordinary person in the speed force. How it looks in a world where time slows down 100 times. But it's not the same. After all the speeds have been increased by 100 times, Li Tian's skills are no longer ordinary. I made a mistake when I told All Might about my speed. At that time, I said that it was a 60-fold increase, but it was actually more than 80 times. Now it is about 90 times and close to 100 times. Li Tian can do things that ordinary people can do in a world where time is 100 times slower, but Li Tian can also do things that ordinary people cannot do in a world where time is 100 times slower. The simplest example is, even if an ordinary person can move freely in a world where time is slowed down by 100 times, he can't run on a building that is 90 degrees vertical like Li Tian, because he slows down other people's time, instead of Li Tian increasing his own speed. In the same way, speeding up one's own time performance is the same as the speed force. What Li Tian possessed was super speed, agility 100 times higher than ordinary people, and motor nerves 100 times higher than ordinary people. Even though his strength was not strong, it meant that Li Tian's skills were no longer at the level of ordinary people. To be honest, after actually possessing the speed force, Li Tian couldn't understand the flashes he saw in his previous life. What kind of past turned a speedster into that? Under 100 times of thinking, Li Tian's many thoughts could not be realized for a moment, and as soon as he raised his hand, Li Tian slashed at the back of Hong's neck with a hand knife. Boom! The back of the neck was hit hard and fell directly to the ground. He fell to the ground with a bang as if a switch had been touched, and time flowed again. The dense ice thorns exploded at a high speed, and countless fine ice shards splashed in all directions, dazzling and gorgeous in the sunlight. On the side, Ojiro, who was still worried, should be worried about Li Tian's safety, was stunned, looking at Hong, who suddenly appeared in Hong's position and lying on the ground. His eyes were dazed. It's over. Li Tian withdrew from Speed Force and said lightly. It's over. Li Tian withdrew from Speed Force and said lightly. Ojiro was stunned, not to mention Ojiro, even everyone in the monitoring room was stunned. The camera equipped in the school is obviously not the kind of high-frame camera that can capture Li Tian's terrifying speed far exceeding Mach 2. So the scene just now, to everyone in the monitoring room, seemed as if someone had erased a period of time in between. 1 second Li Tian was attacked and in crisis, and the next second he fell to the ground with a bang. Not even All Might could have seen what had just happened. Let's go, find classmate Shoji. Li Tian walked towards Ojiro, ready to help him break the ice that froze his feet. You said, what's over? Suddenly, the sound of bang sounded again, and the cold air instantly filled the entire hall, and the temperature seemed to drop by dozens of degrees. Ha! Li Tian was startled, turned around and saw Hong, who was getting up from the ground. Didn't you pass out? Li Tian looked at the knife in his hand, then at the hand covering the side of his neck, and couldn't help but feel a burst of embarrassment. Operator. Operator. Li Tian looked up at the sky involuntarily, with a helpless look on his face, seeing on so many TV dramas that any woman would be dizzy with a single cut. Li Tian thought it would be easy, and was afraid of really hurting Hong. None of them used the inertial boost, but controlled Rikido. Results now. The TV series mistaken me. Li Tian just wanted to cry. He had pretended to be so chic before, but in the end, clutching the back of his neck, he fought against the ice wall on one side. After a while of fear, Li Tian suddenly appeared from behind him. He really didn't realize it. After all, no one leaning on the wall would expect that appear behind him. You were really boring. Hong stood up, looked at Li Tian solemnly and said in a deep voice. Li Tian could suddenly appear behind him. Naturally it didn't destroy his ice wall, but moved him 2 steps forward. That's right, at that moment, Li Tian moved him 2 steps forward without any reaction at all, and then Li Tian stood behind him and gave him a hand knife. To be handsome. Ye Hong's intelligence instantly guessed Li Tian's thoughts. Although he is very strong, I still have a chance to be handsome and give pointers. He didn't take this battle to heart at all. This is the key to my victory. Hong stared at Li Tian, his eyes sparkling, and his right hand the cold air kept coming out. Boom, classmate, don't think about fighting. Li Tian calmed down his embarrassing heart, turned his head to look at Hong, who had made a fighting posture, and said lightly, the battle is over. If you don't believe me, just watch for yourself, get it? On hand, startled, he subconsciously looked at his right hand, where a circle of tape was wrapped around his wrist. This is capture tape. Hong's eyes narrowed suddenly. When, as if seeing the problem with Hong, Li Tian casually said, just when you got up and said, "What's over?" and I took a moment to go out for a walk, and Shoji also wrapped up with capture tape. As if to confirm Li Tian's words, the voice of All Might came from the earphones they wore in their ears. Heroes group is captured, villains group wins. Okay, the competition is over. Can Hong be exposed to ice? Long-term freezing will do great harm to Ojiro's body. Li Tian said softly. Silence. Boom fell silent, but a wave of heat spread rapidly from under Hong's feet, and the thick layer of ice instantly turned into steam and dissipated. Next time, I will win, Hong said coldly, turned around and left. Seeing the figure of Hong leaving, Li Tian shrugged his shoulders, and called Ojiro, who was still a little dizzy, to leave together. Go back to the monitoring room. Just when All Might was about to let Yaoyorozu Wan girls comment again. There is no need to comment. Hong interrupted coldly. No matter how we analyze and formulate the strategy, the final result will be the same. There is too much difference in level. Boom is not only referring to Li Tian and his level, but also referring to Shoji and Ojiro. The gap between these two people and him is too big, and the gap between him and Li Tian is too big. In this kind of simulated actual combat, there is no way to break the game at all. Although the words were a bit impersonal, the children's shoes present could indeed understand Hong's words. Especially Ojiro, who saw a fairy fight with his own eyes, and Shoji, who was declared out of nowhere for no reason, have a deep understanding of this. Only Bakugo stared at Li Tian and Hong with extreme unwillingness. By the way, there was also Green Valley. Bakugo's eyes kept gliding across the three of them, his extremely angry eyes were full of unwillingness. From kindergarten, elementary school, and junior high school, he has always been the best in terms of grades, sports, and quirks, and he fully understood it the second day he came to Xiangyang. With Xiangyang here, he will not be the same as before, he will be the best one. Whether it's Hong who showed overwhelming strength, Li Tian who beat Hong, or the fact that Green Valley beat him by tricks. All of this made him extremely unwilling, and his self-esteem did not allow him to play tricks just because he lost in this kind of strategy, so he went to comfort himself that he was not defeated. That icy face, that black-bellied man, and that guy who is smelly for a long time, you just wait for me. Bakugo gritted his teeth in extreme unwillingness. I will definitely surpass you, the first place, only it's me. The class is still going on. The last group of battles is the heroes group played by Asui Suyu and Aoyama Yuga of Group 1, and the villains group played by Ashido Mina and Shiro Hanta of Group J, and the final group battle is completed also finished quickly. In this battle, no one suffered any serious injuries, and the first combat training was considered very good. After returning, we should reflect on our own mistakes and think about what to do again. In the end, can you win or do better than this time? All Might looked at the children's shoes of Class A and said seriously. Listening to All Might's words, everyone couldn't help thinking. Seeing the students listening in, All Might grinned. All in all, thank you for your hard work. Get out of class is over now. Is this the end of the get out of class? After Mr. Aizawa, this kind of normal teaching always feels a bit of a gap. Asui, who said anything, said it directly. Ahem. This normal teaching is also the teacher's freedom. All Might said a little embarrassedly. As a teacher for the first time, he even needs to read the lesson preparation content according to the cheat sheet. How could he be like Aizawa Shota veteran teacher means? Okay, everyone, hurry up and change your clothes and go back to the classroom. After summarizing today's harvest, you can go home from school. Saying that, All Might flew away from the passage in an instant, feeling quite a sense of escape. However, in fact, All Might at this time is indeed not too different from running away from the desert. After leaving the sight of the students, All Might jumped out of the tunnel, and then a puff of white smoke rose, and All Might instantly changed back to that skinny posture. After the class started, there's not enough time for the muscle form. All Might coughed twice, with a bitter look in his eyes, and walked towards the lounge with 3 steps. After All Might announced the dismissal of get out of class, both men and women went to their respective changing rooms. On the way, the boys surrounded Li Tian without any doubt, and started discussing with each other. Student Li Tian, what exactly is your quirks? Is it running super fast? It feels super powerful, Kirishima Eijiro, who was close to Li Tian, suddenly asked curiously. As soon as these words came out, everyone around fell silent, even the indifferent Hong and the always sullen Bakugo pricked up their ears. My quirks. It's almost like running super fast, Li Tian said. Approximately. On the side, Iida suddenly remembered something, and the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. Student Li Tian, may I ask how close this is? How much difference? Li Tian looked at the curious eyes of a group of students around him and thought for a while before saying, my quirks can improve my running speed, body movement speed, nerve reflex speed, dynamic vision, thinking speed, etc. Wait until the other speeds except strength are strengthened dozens of times. Kirishima Eijiro. Running speed. Kaminari Denki. Limb movement speed. Ojiro Mashirao. Neural reflex speed. Sato Rikido. Dynamic vision. Tokiami Fumikage. Thinking speed. Everyone. All strengthened dozens of times. On the side, Bakugo and the two of them trembled in their steps and froze in place. They are all people who want to be heroes. How could they not know the result of the series of things that Li Tian said will be enhanced by dozens of times? Can this be called similar? Iida, who is also a quirks who can run very fast, looked at Li Tian with resentment in his eyes. Even if he knew that what Li Tian said was actually much worse, but now he still feels uncomfortable. Isn't this almost the same? My quirks are also super fast, Li Tian said innocently. It's far away, okay. Li Tian couldn't help but shut his mouth as he watched the erupting crowd. Looking at Li Tian's appearance, even if he was on the sidelines, Lu Jiyu, who had known for a long time, couldn't help but wryly smiled at the resentful people. If these people know that Mr. Li Tian's quirks has only been awakened for more than a month, then he also got one for all at about the same time, but after looking at others and himself, Green Valley felt that he was really a failure. Obviously inherited the powerful quirks from All Might, but in the end it was used as a suicidal quirks that kills 1,000 enemies and damages itself 1,352.6. Wait, you said that your quirks won't increase your strength, but you clearly. Bakugo noticed the blind spot and hurried forward to question. You mean grip strength? That's inertia. Since Li Tian chose to say it, he didn't mean to hide anything. Actually, things like speed will carry a huge amount of inertia when they reach a certain level. So although my strength is not strong, I can still rely on the inertia brought by the speed to exert my strength. Saying that, stretched out and demonstrated to everyone. Look at my palm. Everyone looked at Li Tian's outstretched hand, and suddenly their eyes blurred, and a clear sonic boom sounded in their ears, and then they saw Li Tian's clenched fist. It's just that the recoil force is a bit high. Li Tian spread out his hands again, showing his reddened palms. Every time you use it, it will easily cause slight muscle strain, and if you use too much force, there will be fractures, injuries like that. Muscle strain, fracture. Doesn't that mean, Li Tian, every time you use quirks, you will be covered in bruises? Kaminari Denki exclaimed. It's not that serious. Facing the worried eyes of a group of students, Li Tian smiled and waved his hands. Because of quirks, my recovery ability is many times faster than ordinary people. It will recover in a second. Forehead. Hearing Li Tian's words, everyone who was a little nervous just now looked at Li Tian's white palm and couldn't help but want to slap themselves. What did they hear? Because quirks' relationship recovery is much faster than ordinary people, this kind of minor injury will heal within a second. It turns out that super speed also has this ability. What a ghost. Whoever runs fast will run fast with resilience. After the baptism of this incident, Li Tian's male classmates understood a profound truth. That is, what Li Tian said was similar, absolutely unbelievable. It's almost the same Li Tianjin. Little idiot, how is school going today? I heard that All Might has gone to Shangying to be a teacher. Is it true? Do you have any classes scheduled for All Might? Li Tian heard a series of curious questions from his aunt after a while at home. The problem. I've said it all, don't call me a little idiot. Li Tian rolled his eyes and changed his shoes. If you don't call it a small rice bucket, then you can call it a big rice bucket. Yu Shanyu snorted. Quickly answer my question, does All Might really go to Shangying to be a teacher? Of course I'm here, and this afternoon is All Might's class for us. How about it, Envy? Li Tian changed his shoes. Li Tian said perfunctorily and walked towards the kitchen. Cut, bragging. Yu Shanyu looked at Li Tian with contempt. It's only the second day of school. Even if All Might goes to Xiangying, it's impossible to teach a group of rookies in the first year of high school so early. Sister Yi was called to help again. Looking at the steamed rice in the kitchen, Li Tian asked casually. Yeah, I'll be rescued later. Yu Shan nodded and didn't say much. Because of quirks, Nanli Yi often performs some tasks that require signing confidentiality regulations. There is a lot of money, and it is not dangerous. It is just that confidentiality is very tight, so I can't say much. Li Tian just said casually, not paying attention to anything at all. Putting on the apron, Li Tian lighted the fire and started cooking. There is no way. One of the women in the family is a ghost blaster who can blow up the kitchen, and the other is also a genius alchemist who can make food into poison. Skillfully flipping the wok to fry the vegetables, Li Tian looked at the black wok in his hand and began to think. In the plot of the original novel, within a few days after heroes finished the basic course, news spread that All Might was working for Hero, and the reporter even stood guard at Hero's door for several days. Oolong incident. Then, within a few days, it was the first time to face villains' USJ incident. Although All Might had already started to weaken at that time, Nomu, who was able to fight All Might for hundreds of punches and still be unscathed, was definitely at the level of a monster. The power of my current sonic fist barely exceeds the level of Green Valley's full-strength flick. Li Tian compared the scale of his training at the beach with the power of Liv Gu's flick. This kind of Rikido, if you hit that Nomu, it's almost like tickling. Li Tian scratched his head. Although he is very unwilling, but apart from speed, he is really far behind in terms of strength. How to do it? Li Tian was thinking. It is impossible for him to tell Xiangying that there will be villains invading during the USJ class, and he also brought a monster Nomu who can compete with All Might for a short time. There is no way to explain how he knew it. Maybe he will face more serious problems, such as being suspected of being a spy, and even if there is no doubt, he may be under surveillance in the future, and his life after that, but there is a mess. You know, Li Tian's ideal is to become a kind of Aizawa Shota before joining Hero, who can get money, but has a secret heroes who doesn't show much attention. Relying on the speed that ordinary people can hardly see, Li Tian's ideal is definitely not a fantasy. Kiki, far away. Why don't you try the pseudo-prophet's prophecy method secreted by the traversers? Li Tian turned the frying pan. Li Tian thought for a while, and then decisively passed it. This world is not the kind of world that can be fooled casually. In this quirks society with countless strange abilities, it is quite simple to judge whether a person is lying. Besides, in this world, there are true quirks who can predict the future. Why don't you send a letter to Yan anonymously, asking him to use quirks to pay attention to Xiangying? With his influence, Xiangying might listen. Li Tian thought about it. But, don't touch that guy. Li Tian shook his head decisively. Even if he sent the letter anonymously, with that guy's ability, he would definitely be able to find him, and with that kind of superpower to predict the future, Li Tian is not likely to be encountered at all. Who knows what secrets he will see in himself. Forget it, just let nature take its course. Although we can't beat that perverted Nomu, but the plan is made, it won't be a problem to delay until All Might arrives, but... Li Tian narrowed his eyes, hesitant. Can he really be ready to face the villains and face the battle? Although he was not young in his previous life, he lived in a peaceful society, so he was doomed not to fight with others much, and his previous life was similar. As a quirkless junior high school student in a hero's family, he was doomed. It is impossible for him to be the kind of bad boy with rich fighting experience. It can be said that the fight in the small building today is the only scene in his life that can be regarded as a fight. This is also the reason why Li Tian hesitated. He has never even fought. He can really face the villains well. Fight for life and death. At that time, I don't know if I can swing my fist without hesitation. Li Tian couldn't help but pause. This kind of thing. Sarah, who would know if he hadn't beaten him before? May I ask my classmates, what was it like when All Might was teaching? Which classmate, how do you feel about taking All Might's class? Is there any difference between All Might's class and other teachers? Will it be very strict? In front of Xiangying's door, a group of reporters surrounded and intercepted a student, and when they caught a student, they bombarded him with questions. However, even if it is only the third day that All Might has been working in Xiangying, for most of the students, they have not taken All Might courses at all, and many students have not even seen All Might on campus. After all, Xiangying is not really unclear about All Might's teaching ability. The Little Heroes reserves who teach heroes subjects are okay, but whether it is heroes subjects or support subjects, it is strange that he can teach, so I just find time to show up in front of those classes to encourage them, that's all. Standing some distance from the school gate, Li Tian watched the scene of crazy reporters blocking the gate and blocking up and bombarding a student. When he saw a student, he couldn't help being speechless. Isn't it the reason why he wants to become the hero of the hidden system? He himself is not Endeavor's kind of tough personality who can intimidate reporters with a single face and dare not move. With his speed and strength, he will become famous sooner or later. Although he dare not say that he has surpassed All Might, the attention is definitely not much less than those first-line and even superstars in his previous life. Although Li Tian thinks he is not a low-key personality, but it is too exaggerated to stand directly under the spotlight and be watched by hundreds of millions of people all over the country and even the world. Especially thinking that Li Tian had to think carefully before speaking in front of the camera, which gave Li Tian a terrible headache. Mama, that's why I want to be a heroes of the secret department like Aizawa-sensei. Activated the Speed Force, a series of flashes past countless reporters. Li Tian, who appeared on campus, scratched his head helplessly, said. That's really an honor. I can be a role model for Li Tian. A weak voice sounded. Shouldn't teachers be role models for students? Li Tian shrugged, and was not surprised by Aizawa Shota standing beside him. He had already seen it. However, Li Tian, it is forbidden to use quirks in public places outside the school, and it is the same in school without the teacher's permission. Aizawa Shota said lightly. Quirks, if you don't use them or exercise them, how can they become stronger? Li Tian looked at Aizawa Shota speechlessly. I don't believe that those professional heroes didn't live in a secret place before they got their licenses. Secretly exercise your quirks. Cough. Aizawa Shota coughed lightly and turned away from looking at Li Tian. Indeed, although not all professional heroes are like this, most of the top professional heroes are like this. Work out your quirks secretly by yourself before getting your license. Even he, before becoming a professional heroes, would crazily practice the arresting methods of combat. Although the main training was not quirks, he did not use quirks less to cooperate with training. 1. Aizawa Shota turned and walked towards the door, ready to deal with the reporters outside, and when passing by Li Tian, he whispered in a voice that only the two of them could hear, be careful, don't get caught. Quote. Hey. Li Tian grinned, turned and walked towards the school. In the morning of Xiangying, there are still ordinary compulsory courses, which makes people feel unmotivated. After all, this kind of simple knowledge has already been completed by self-study for the top students in Class A, such as Li Tian, Yaoyorozu Wan, and Bakugo. Among them, Yaoyorozu Wan's knowledge reserve even exceeds many university graduate students. And for others, these things are not as interesting as the afternoon class, so naturally they can't afford to listen. Only the class meeting caused a little disturbance. After Aizawa Shota feebly decided to let the students elect the class monitor and other school committee members, almost all of them eagerly expressed their desire to be class monitors. If it is in an ordinary class, the position of monitor is equivalent to doing odd jobs, but in the heroes department, this is a position that leads the future heroes. For the top professional heroes, leading everyone is a necessary quality. So, this happens. However, Li Tian said that he has no interest in the position of monitor. For the heroes of the secret department, the ability to lead others is not necessary. Do odd jobs. With that skill, he might as well go out and run a couple of laps. Because Iida proposed to use voting as a democratic method of election, Li Tian casually gave the votes to the veteran cadre Iida, who was really good. As for the final result, Yaoyorozu Momo was elected monitor by 3 votes. Iida was elected vice president by 2 votes. After that, everyone else basically has 1 vote. On the contrary, Li Tian raised his eyebrows. He was a little surprised when he saw his vote. His vote was for Iida. It's a pass vote. Li Tian suddenly understood the zero vote behind Yi Yin at the end, and couldn't help laughing and shaking his head. On the other side, Yi Yin looked at Li Tian's vote in a daze. She voted for Li Tian and she still got 1 vote. Doesn't that mean that Li Tian voted for someone else? Li Tian, doesn't he want to be the squad leader? Yi Yin looked at Li Tian, who showed a big smile to her, a little puzzled. At the end of the class meeting, the curtain came to an end with the sonorous and powerful declarations of Yaoyorozu Wan and Iida. Canteen at noon. All students in the school eat here. And because the selection of the class committee was a little late, the cafeteria was already overcrowded. But Li Tian, who has become acquainted with Hero's lunch rush, the chef of the cafeteria, easily got the dishes specially prepared for him from Xiaozhou. This should be a dinner party. But I'm really embarrassed to eat Li Tian's lunch, Uraraka Ochako said embarrassingly, holding his rice bowl. Haha, it's okay, teacher lunch rush prepared a lot more meals today. If you eat a little less, it won't hurt, not to mention that you paid for it yourself. Li Tian said indifferently. Recently, due to the recent improvement of the Speed Force, Li Tian's food intake has also improved greatly, so he asked Lunch Rush to prepare for him with a serving of 120 to 30 people, so eat with classmates and eat less than a dozen people. The portion size is not enough for Li Tian to go hungry. What's more, according to Li Tian's standards, the food eaten by more than a dozen people in Class A is not even enough for 10 people. If it's a class dinner, isn't it okay not to call it Bakugo-chan and Hong-chan? Asui hesitated, propping his chin. The two of them can't be called at all. Kirishima Eijiro spread his hands helplessly, thinking of the expression on Bakugo's face that he would not eat that guy's meal when he asked Bakugo to stop queuing. As for Hong, when they went to call, they were already eating. A box of ultra-luxury high-end cold food rice balls, and various ultra-luxury dishes to match. Just looking at the other party, he didn't have the courage to invite him. However, quirks, which are half cold and half hot, are really suitable for carrying a bento. After all, no matter whether it is hot or cold, they can keep the temperature very well. Hollow down pointing triangle winking face. Unlike the girls, the boys have already started to eat unceremoniously. Kaminari said inarticulately while adding food to his mouth, "It's delicious, but I always feel that classmate Li Tian's food tastes better. Much better than before." "I feel that way too," Ojiro interjected. "Because mine is Xiaozhou. Of course the taste will be better," Li Tian said with a nod. "Of course. You are really honest." The surrounding people looked at the outspoken Li Tian rather speechlessly. Shouldn't this kind of thing be kept a secret? If you also go to the back kitchen to help like me, Lunch Rush will definitely cook for you. Li Tian glanced at the crowd and said with curled lips. "Help in the back kitchen." Everyone was taken aback. "Student Li Tian, do you mean that you went to the back kitchen to help cook?" Jiro Kyoka looked at Li Tian in disbelief and asked. "Well, every day." Li Tian nodded, "but my cooking skills are still far behind Lunch Rush, so for the time being, I can only help with cutting vegetables and handling ingredients." "But your time." Just as Lu Jiyu was about to speak, he remembered Li Tian's quirks, and immediately took the words back. "Are all the ingredients for these dishes prepared by classmate Li Tian?" Everyone looked at the delicate dishes on the plate, which were no different from the usual ones, and they were incredulous. How can the knife skills of these ingredients not look like the handiwork of a student like Li Tian? As if seeing everyone's astonishment, Li Tian said lightly, "If you also prepare my kind of food every day, with your aptitude, you can't say that you are good at cooking, but you can quickly master your knife skills." Forehead. Everyone thought of the exaggerated amount that Li Tian ate every meal, and they couldn't help but sweat. Doesn't Li Tian have a cook at home? As long as 100 cooks are arranged to cook, wouldn't it be easy to prepare meals for 100 people? Yaoyorozu Momo asked in surprise. 100. A chef, including Li Tian. Everyone present trembled all over, and looked at Yaoyorozu Momo, who still looked puzzled stiffly. Hearing the meaning of this. "What's wrong with you?" Yaoyorozu Momo was taken aback, and looked at the crowd in bewilderment. "Sir, may I ask, how many chefs are there in your family?" Yi Yin asked curiously. After all, what is the tone of arranging 100 chefs to prepare meals for 100 people? How many cooks? Because there are not many people in our family, and there are often people who don't eat extra meals, so there are only 20 cooks. Although Yaoyorozu Wan was very surprised by Yi Yin's question, he still answered truthfully. Only 20. Chef. Everyone was stunned. This is a real lady. Our kitchen can't hold 100 chefs cooking together. Li Tian complained speechlessly, holding a bowl of rice in his hand. Ah, Yaoyorozu was stunned for a moment, and then realized that he had said something wrong when he saw everyone's envious and strange expressions. I'm sorry, classmate Li Tian, I thought, because classmate Li Tian speaking of cooking at home every day, I thought Li Tian's kitchen could prepare food for 100 people at the same time. The corners of Li Tian's mouth twitched. Even the kitchens of ordinary big hotels rarely have the scale for 100 people to cook at the same time. Not to mention the kitchen at home. Was about to speak. Ding ding ding. The sound of urgent sirens resounded throughout the campus. Safety Defense 3 has been breached. Please go to the outdoors to evacuate quickly. The mechanical siren sounded into everyone's ears. Alarm. What is Security Defense 3? Different from the senior students who quickly started to evacuate, Li Tian and the other freshmen who just entered the school have no idea what the alarm means. Security Defense 3 means that someone broke through the defense outside the heroic school and invaded the school building. Yaoyorozu Momo got up quickly and said, "Students, we have to prepare to evacuate." Just when Yaoyorozu Momo's voice fell, he was about to organize his classmates to take refuge. Don't worry, Li Tian, who was eating at the dining table, suddenly said, I did an investigation just now. A group of reporters broke through the school's defense and blocked the teaching building. Reporter. Hearing Li Tian's words, the surrounding people were stunned. Please let us meet All Might. Please let All Might out. All Might is here. Yeah, let All Might come out, we'll just do an interview. A group of reporters carrying long guns and short cannons blocked in front of the teaching building and made a lot of noise. I told you, he didn't go to work. President Mike shouted loudly. You guys, if you have the first sentence, you will have the second sentence. Aizawa Shota said helplessly. However, the words of the two had no effect at all, and the excited reporters still wanted to rush in frantically, shouting All Might loudly. Illegally invading Hero Academy. They are already villains, can I launch quirks and knock them all into the air? President Mike complained in a depressed voice. If you want the news about the beating of journalists in Shangying classroom to spread across the country, then do it. Aizawa Shota said angrily after giving himself an old classmate, if you don't want to, then just stop them honestly, the police it'll be here soon. As soon as the voice fell, outside the Shangying campus, the iconic sound of the police car also entered the campus. At the same time, Yaoyorozu Momo, who directed the chaotic students to evacuate the crowded cafeteria corridor with the loudspeaker he created, put down the loudspeaker and let go tone. Finally they have calmed down. Yaoyorozu Wan and other students who helped him were all relieved. I said everything will be fine. This is Shangying, a top-notch university. The quality of the students is much better than expected. As long as the explanation is clear, there will be no accidents at all. Holding a bowl of white rice, Li Tian couldn't help knowing where it came from. He came over and spoke. Li Tian, where did you go just now? Why didn't I see you anywhere? Yi Yin turned around and said strangely. Me, I went to investigate just now. Li Tian said and quickly finished the rice in the bowl. Okay, I'm full, I'll ask the teacher and the others to report on the investigation, you can go back first. Quote. After finishing speaking, without waiting for the students to answer, Li Tian turned into a flash of lightning and disappeared in front of everyone. Everyone looked at the back of Li Tian's disappearance, and there was an empty dining table on one side, and all the meals for 100 people had been cleared. Hollow up pointing triangle winking face. Just now, he definitely went to eat. In the world of Speed Force, Li Tian quickly found Aizawa Shota on campus. Of course, he didn't just finish his lunch just now. So, you really ate just now. When he heard the alarm sound and saw the press corps invade, Li Tian knew that the time had come. Chu Hu asked. Ah no, it's the prelude to the USJ incident. The time for Tamura Shigaraki and League of Villains debut is coming soon. I don't know if my plan can organize the League of Villains to form a scale. Li Tian narrowed his eyes. He didn't want to fall into a super busy state after becoming a professional hero, so he threatened to wipe it out in the bud right. Ms. Aizawa. Far away, Li Tian saw Aizawa Shota, who was waiting to deal with this time beside the police. Student Li Tian, what are you doing here? Seeing Li Tian's appearance, Aizawa Shota frowned. You should follow the instructions of the alarm and take refuge in the open space. Don't worry about such small things. Li Tian waved his hand, then whispered, I have a clue about this matter. Clues? Aizawa Shota frowned, watched Li Tian think for a moment before whispering, you follow me. Following Aizawa Shota, the two came to a remote corner beside the teaching building. What clues do you have about this matter? Aizawa Shota asked in a deep voice. Clearing his throat, Li Tian said, I was eating when the alarm sounded. Get to the point, Aizawa Shota interrupted. Teacher, don't worry, the important point will come soon. Li Tian waved his hand quickly and said. When I was eating, I heard the alarm go off, and then I got up and quickly went to the window to take a look. After I found out that it was a reporter's intrusion, I went back and told my classmates, telling them not to panic and helping to maintain order, and then rushed over. All the children's shoes. Shameless old thief, shut up. At that time, teacher, you were entangled with the reporters, so I went to the main gate to check the situation, and then found that the defense measures of the heroic gate were all turned into scum all over the place, which is why the group of reporters were able to break in. Aizawa Shota stared. The key point will come soon. Seeing Aizawa Shota's impatient look, Li Tian was not joking, and quickly said, at the gate, I found a figure leaving with his back facing Xiangying. Some kind of decadent and sickly bluish-haired guy. When I saw that guy's strange behavior, I guessed that he might have something to do with this incident, so I followed him. Then I saw him in a remote woods outside with another man who looked like Black Mist. Guy met, and the guy was holding what looked like our school schedule. After that person who looked like Kurogiri suddenly swelled up and turned into more Kurogiri. That decadent and sick man walked into Kurogiri and the two of them disappeared. Li Tian quickly compared what he saw, and some of the words he processed were mixed together and spoken out. A decadent guy with light blue hair who looks sickly. Someone like Kurogiri who makes quirks disappear in an instant. And our school schedule. Aizawa Shota frowned and lowered his head in thought. Ms. Aizawa, Li Tian was about to speak. Okay, I know everything, you go back to the classroom first. This matter is kept secret for the time being, don't tell others. After finishing speaking, Aizawa Shota turned around and left. This unloading, the speed of crossing the river and tearing down the bridge. As expected of a teacher, I still have something to learn. Li Tian looked at Aizawa Shota, who simply left and shrugged. Now that his words have been brought, the first step is completed. Kurogiri, have you found the right place and time to attack? In a bar in a dilapidated building, a pale and sickly-looking Tamura Shigaraki came out from the side room and asked questions. While walking, he put models made of several palms on his face and body. I've found it. Inside the bar, a man wearing a high-collar suit and covered in purple-black smoke said in a deep voice. It was Kurogiri who possessed the rare teleportation quirks. About 10 days later, All Might had a class in Xiangying, which was held in the USJ venue, which is quite far from the main campus of Xiangying. The two accompanying teachers were to eliminate heroes Eraserhead, and they were active on the front line of rescue. Rescue Heroes number 13, and the students in his class are from this year. Kurogiri said one after another. Okay, it's enough to know the course of action of All Might. Sitting on the edge of the bar with a nonchalant expression on his face, Nigaragi said, those students, didn't they recruit some punks in the name of the League of Villains before? Is it similar? Just leave it to those people to deal with it. However, the heroes who can be admitted to Xiangying can be regarded as elites, and their quirks are definitely not weak. Can all those little be dealt with? Kurogiri said in a deep voice. Kurogiri, it looks like you haven't understood yet. Nekoragi laughed strangely. Xiangying was attacked by the villains, and the symbol of peace fell. Even if those students defeated those little fools, even if none of them died, then this peaceful society will also collapse. Those students are nothing compared to All Might, the symbol of peace. Well said, Hang. Suddenly, a compliment came from a TV in the bar. My lord, Kurogiri turned respectfully and saluted to the TV. Teacher, Shigongmu also said respectfully in a deep voice. Hang, it seems that you have realized that this fragile peaceful society is actually built on the symbol of All Might peace, which is very good. The gloomy voice continued to come from the TV. But, you underestimate All Might, and you underestimate those students. Teacher, with your Nomu, what's so scary about All Might? Niganmu was a little unconvinced, and pointed at the figure in the corner of the small bar with his hand. It was an incomparably burly figure, with bulging jet black muscles all over its body, exposed brain-like body tissue on the top of its head, and a sharp mouth like a bird's beak. Come here, there is almost no other sense of existence. Nomu's power is very strong, and it was modified for All Might, but after all, it's just a modified product. If it wasn't for the fact that All Might was seriously injured a few years ago and is now weakened, otherwise your plan would have almost no success. Hope, All for One on the other side of the TV said mercilessly. Then why are you, teacher? Siganmu was puzzled. Didn't you say that All Might was seriously injured a few years ago, and now he's so weak that it's unbelievable? If the plan is perfect, the chances of killing All Might are still very high, and your plan this time is very good. Those students will be an important tool to kill All Might, understand? Hang on. So that's how it is. I understand, teacher. Shigaraki thought of something, and then a sullen smile appeared on his face. For All Might, those students are his lifeblood. Very good, came the voice of All for One, go ahead and do it. Hang on, go and completely destroy this false peaceful society, the hypocritical heroes society. Dash dash, boom boom boom. During the class, there was a knock on the door of the classroom, and the class of Class A was interrupted. Li Tian, come out. The listless Aizawa Shota greeted the teacher in class, then looked at Li Tian and shouted. Li Tian was not surprised either. If he guessed correctly, Aizawa Shota called him just for the noon event. Sure enough, after walking out of the teacher, the principal will ask you what you saw at noon later, just repeat what you told me. Aizawa Shota reminded Li Tian. Understood. Li Tian nodded. Following behind Aizawa Shota, the two soon came to the door of the principal's office. Boom boom boom. Come in. Mr. Principal's cute-sounding voice came out. Pushing open the door, Li Tian walked in following Aizawa Shota. Looking around, the principal was not the only one present in the principal's office. Mr. Principal, All Might, and a somewhat familiar police officer were present. Student Li Tian, don't be nervous. This is the upright police officer in Tsukuchi. He is here to take charge of the scene of the heroic invasion. Just tell us what you saw. It's neither a bear nor a dog. Mr. Principal, who evolved from a mouse, said with a smile. Li Tian nodded, and began to narrate in a deep voice. On this occasion, Li Tian certainly wouldn't joke like Aizawa Shota, but simply and intuitively said the matter. These can all be investigated. Because he really saw the meeting between Tamura Shigaraki and Kurogiri at the school gate. The same was true for that piece of paper, although I couldn't see what was written clearly, but after a glance, it probably meant that the curriculum was correct. The story is over. Well, Li Tian, you did a good job. After listening to Li Tian's retelling, Mr. Principal nodded in praise. Don't blame me for watching the villains who destroyed the hero's school gate leave. Li Tian smiled and said softly. Of course not. Before obtaining the hero's license or the permission of the professional heroes, it is illegal to use quirks even in front of the villains, and the other party has the space to transfer. Troublesome quirks, it's normal for us to be escaped too late. Mr. Principal said with a smile. The police officer on the side also nodded, and said, Student Li Tian, can you please help me to show the faces of the two provocative villains? We need to restore the appearance of the villains. It doesn't need to be so troublesome, I can draw it, can I make a sketch? Li Tian said directly. Because he wants to become a Wenchaogong and carry comics to make money here, Li Tian has taken the time to learn how to draw. Adding the super speed training ability brought by the Speed Force and the boost when entering the extreme speed mode, he only draws 2 portraits, is still very simple. Li Tian can draw. Tsukauchi Masao asked in surprise, that would be great, trouble. Small matter, am I also Shangying's student after all? Li Tian said politely, and took the pencil and drawing paper handed over by Mr. Principal. As soon as his eyes were fixed, the golden arc of super speed force flashed on Li Tian's body. In an instant, Li Tian entered the speed mode. With a paintbrush in his hand, he began to recall the images of Tamura Shigaraki and Kurogiri he saw today. Up. In the eyes of others, they could see Li Tian with golden arcs flashing across his body from time to time, moving his pen like flying, so fast that they saw only double images. However, the characters on the drawing paper quickly took shape and appeared in their eyes. It was a decadent man who looked a little thin and sick, and he looked like he was only in his teens. As for the other one, it looks more abstract. After all, the overall image of Kurogiri is just a mass of purple-black mist, and the face cannot be seen at all, but the painting is also very fine. Call. Li Tian exhaled softly, subconsciously sifted through the drawing paper in his hand, and then realized that this was not his cartoon. It's these two people, Li Tian said, and put the drawing paper on the table. Are these two people? Mr. Principal picked up the drawing paper, glanced at it casually, and handed it to Police Officer Masaru Tsukauchi. Student Li Tian's drawing skills are great. Tsukauchi passed 2 pieces of drawing paper, looked carefully and praised. Mr. Principal, since I have obtained the portrait of the prisoner, I will take my leave first. If you have any updates, please contact the police immediately. Mr. Principal nodded in response. After Masao Tsukauchi left, he was in the principal's office. Student Li Tian, you have made great contributions to this matter, do you have any rewards you want? Mr. Principal asked with a smile. Rewards, and rewards. Li Tian was taken aback, he really hadn't thought about rewards. Of course there is a reward. If you catch the villains who provoked Xiangying this time, then Li Tian, you will be the first one. Mr. Principal still smiled. Provoke Xiangying. With all due respect to the principal, this time is definitely not a simple provocation. Li Tian frowned and said in a deep voice. Oh, Mr. Principal showed interest, then what do you think, Li Tian? Li Tian was about to speak when he suddenly realized that in front of him, whether it was Mr. Principal with quirks as super intelligent, All Might as a symbol of peace, or heroes Aizawa Shota from the secret department. Which of these 3 people is a simple person? Such an obvious thing needs to be reminded by him. Seeing Li Tian's reaction, the 3 looked at each other. All Might and Mr. Principal both laughed at the same time, and Aizawa Shota showed a strange look in Li Tian's eyes. Haha, young man Li Tian, don't worry about saying what you think. All Might said with a smile. Then I'll make a fool of myself. Li Tian shook his head helplessly. The simplest judgment is that villains stole a piece of paper that looks like a school schedule from Xiangying, regardless of whether villains' purpose is provocation, but after villains took away the suspected class schedule paper, it is absolutely impossible to judge that this is a simple act of provocation. Well, it makes sense. All Might nodded and said, however, until this matter is investigated, you must not tell it, young Li Tian, and keep it strictly confidential. I understand. Li Tian nodded in understanding. Since Li Tian understands the seriousness of this matter and doesn't want a reward, then go back first. Mr. Principal said with a smile. Forehead. When did he say no rewards? Then I'll go back to class first. Li Tian was speechless, looked resentfully at Mr. Principal who had clearly driven him away, turned and left. After Li Tian left the principal's office. Sure enough, it's just as you said, Li Tian is a smart kid. Mr. Principal first said with a smile. Well, although Li Tian is young, not only is the strength of quirks comparable to real professional heroes, but he is also not an ordinary student in terms of thinking and thinking. All Might praised without hesitation. It's just that he is not very dry. Although he seems to be full of energy every day, it can be seen that he doesn't pay much attention to many things. He has a lazy feeling of passing by. Even becoming a hero has nothing else. The kind of enthusiasm of classmates. Aizawa Shota thought for a while and said in a deep voice. All Might and Mr. Principal's eyes couldn't help but look weird when they heard Aizawa Shota's words. Is this the special induction between the same kind in the legend? Jun Aizawa, All Might asked curiously. I often stay up late and overworked, not lazy. Aizawa Shota twitched the corners of his mouth and couldn't help shouting, it's the exact opposite of Li Tian's situation. That's. All Might sensed something was wrong as soon as the words came out, quickly covered his mouth, and looked at Aizawa Shota in embarrassment. Aizawa Shota has a black line on his face, he really doesn't get along with All Might. Looking at the farce in front of him, Mr. Principal smiled, and explained softly, this should be the legendary genius disease. Because everything is too easy, and I don't feel challenging, so I give it to you. That's how people feel. Well, that's what it means. Aizawa Shota nodded. Oh, and the existence of this weird disease. All Might couldn't help being surprised. Although his strength is largely due to the blessing of One for All, it is also inseparable from his own efforts, suffering, and strength fighting, so he has never had such an idea. This is just a small matter. After all, Li Tian is still young. He will change when he finds a goal worth fighting for. Now, what is more important is this incident. From now on, we need to take precautions against it. Measures have been taken, Mr. Principal said in a deep voice. Li Tian, who had left the principal's office, could no longer hear the conversations of the few people in the room, nor was he interested in listening. So far, the first step of the plan he made has almost no deviations. As for the next thing, it depends on his acting skills, on-the-spot performance and strength. According to the schedule, there are 11 more courses in USJ. By that day, the increase of speed force should be steadily more than 100 times. Even if you can't beat Nomu by then, you should be able to hold it back. As for the others, Li Tian narrowed his eyes slightly, and secretly calculated in his heart. When Li Tian returned to the classroom, it happened to be a break after a class. Li Tian, what did Mr. Aizawa tell you to go out? Is it because of something at noon? As soon as he returned to his role, Yi Yin, who was beside him, couldn't help asking curiously. Well, it's because of that incident. Li Tian nodded. What the hell is that thing? Li Tian, what did you see when you went out at noon today? Mr. Aizawa came here specifically to find you. In front of Li Tian, Kaminari Denki couldn't help asking. Kaminari asked the question, and the other students around looked at Li Tian curiously, waiting to hear Li Tian's answer. Li Tian pulled out a long voice, pretending to be mysterious in a low voice, it's a secret. Operator. Operator. It's a low voice, but Li Tian's voice can be heard by the whole class. This kind of pretending to be mysterious turned out to be a secret behavior, which made all the children's shoes speechless, and seriously protested against Li Tian. Concealing important information. But Li Tian is not the character that these little guys will say everything at the first glance of a threat. Seeing Li Tian's reluctance, the children's shoes finally gave up. After all, they are not ignorant. Looking at Li Tian's appearance, it is obvious that they are not joking with them, but they really can't tell. However, disappointment is inevitable. Those who want to become heroes, who has never thought of defeating villains, punishing evil and promoting good, and what happened at noon today obviously involved the legendary villains, who are the reserve of heroes, of course it will be eager to try. But obviously, they have now determined that they will not have this opportunity. If Li Tian knew what these children's shoes were thinking, he would have laughed 3 times, and told them loudly that Class A would encounter this villain's attack in 11 days. Good news. Moreover, there will be a large number of villains who will come this time. Even if the entire Class A is evenly distributed, each person can get several heads. However, it is obvious that this good news cannot and will not be known in advance by this group of children's shoes. It can only be turned into a surprise for everyone at that time. I just don't know whether the children's shoes in Class A will be surprised or frightened. Students, please line up in 2 teams according to your student number and get on the bus in an orderly manner. Iida's engine was fully turned on, and he shouted to command energetically. As for why it is not the squad leader Yaoyorozu Momo but the deputy squad leader Iida to direct. In the words of Yaoyorozu Wan, it is better to have a boy for this kind of work that requires a loud command. Standing among the classmates, Yaoyorozu Wan looked at Iida, who was excitedly doing command work, and suddenly had a feeling that Iida was really useful. How could I have such a disrespectful thought? It really shouldn't be. In an instant, Yaoyorozu Wan threw this thought away and began to reflect on himself. On the bus to the USJ site. Is it this type? Iida hung his head dejectedly. Haha, there's no point in queuing at all. Ashido Mina said with a smile. It was only after getting on the bus that everyone discovered that Xiangying's bus was not the crowded tourist bus, but a comfortable one like the buses outside. On the second half of the car seat, Li Tian and Yi Yin sat together. Yi Yin also whispered to discuss with Li Tian the problems he encountered in the development of quirks recently. And Li Tian was also thinking about it, while answering and sorting out the questions Yi Yin encountered. After sorting out the problems that Yi Yin had developed in quirks during this period, the two sat in the car and had a private conversation. In fact, he has already understood his feelings for Yi Yin, and it's not that Li Tian doesn't have a good impression of Yi Yin. But just falling in love with Yi Yin like this, I always feel something is not right. It's not because Yi Yin is an invisible person. Yi Yin has already been able to control his transparency into a semi-transparent state long before the start of school, and it's not a problem to spend some time training to completely control his own transparent quirks. But come on, Yi Yin is only 15 years old this year. Although Li Tian is also 15 years old now, Li Tian always feels guilty when he falls in love with 15-year-old Cardamom Lolita. After all, no matter how you say it, at least you should be 16 years old. However, now the last layer of window paper between the two of them is almost pierced. Victoria Sauce, I'm the kind of character who will say whatever comes to mind. Asui, who was sitting on the side of Green Valley, said suddenly. Classmate Asui. Green Valley turned to look at Asui Suyu in a panic. Girl took the initiative to talk to him. You can just call me Suyu-chan. Asui said dumbly, and then continued. Green Valley-chan, your quirks are very similar to All Might. I think so. Hey, it's very similar. But mine, Green Valley was a little out of choice. His quirks were very similar to All Might's quirks, and they were basically the same quirks. Okay. This is a completely unspoken secret. In the back seat, Li Tian couldn't help being startled when he heard Asui's question. Of course, it wasn't because of the similarity between Green Valley and All Might quirks. Li Tian already knew that their quirks were one for all, up. It's just, the scene in front of me seems super familiar. Really, before Suyu-chan didn't say it, I didn't think it. In this way, Lugu's quirks is really similar to All Might. Yi Yin also said in surprise. But All Might won't be injured like Green Valley. It should be specious. Hiroshima Ajiro laughed and relieved Green Valley. That's because Green Valley's physical fitness is too poor, and the level of control over quirks is too bad. Li Tian couldn't help but complain. If Green Valley's physical fitness reaches the level of All Might, maybe really arm wrestling with All Might. How is it possible? Without waiting for others to refute, Green Valley said excitedly directly, that's All Might. How could I compare arms with All Might? You must know that in the villain's animalized class incident, All Might was with astonishing wrist strength. He threw a huge monster weighing tens of tons directly out of the city, and, as expected of a famous fanatic European chef, seeing Green Valley who suddenly started talking about All Might's amazing wrist time in the past, everyone was speechless. Especially Li Tian, looking at Green Valley can't help but get a headache. This guy obviously forgot that he inherited All Might's one for all. As the 9th generation heir, Green Valley was at its peak. Definitely on top of All Might. However, the simple and straightforward quirks of the enhancement system are really good. Whether it's super strength or super speed, you can do a lot of gorgeous things. Hiroshima said enviously, stretched out his arms and stiffened. Unlike me, hardened, although it's okay for people, but it doesn't look very handsome. No, hardened quirks has a wide range of uses, and it has both offensive and defensive capabilities. The upper limit of development is also quite high. If you exercise hard, you may be able to hold All Might's fist in the future. Li Tian interjected with a smile. Fight against All Might's fist. Hiroshima was taken aback, and then the scene of All Might's fight on TV suddenly appeared in his mind, and then he inserted himself into the scene where a dozen streets would be scrapped with one punch forward. Then, Hiroshima trembled all over, shook his head frantically and denied, how is it possible? All Might's fist can smash a skyscraper into small cakes with one punch. If I say it, I'm afraid even the aftermath will be blown away. I said it's the future, and I didn't ask you to take All Might's fist now. Li Tian rolled his eyes, and sure enough, even if he only had to think about it, these European chefs dare not compare with All Might at all. The future. Hiroshima was taken aback. The other students around were also taken aback. Haven't you ever thought that you will surpass All Might in the future, surpass everyone and become the strongest? Li Tian raised his eyebrows and said softly. Hiroshima, didn't you ever imagine that your hardened quirks became so hard All Might, so hard that no one could break your defenses? Quote. Asui, you never imagined that your frog quirks can leap hundreds of meters high, and a skyscraper will rise from the ground with a roll of its tongue, and it can walk through the stormy sea without fear. Quote. Bakugo, haven't you thought that your explosion is an explosion comparable to a billion-ton nuclear bomb? Quote. Boom, haven't you ever imagined how your half cold, half hot looks like when you raise your hands to freeze the sea, and turn your hands to see the sea of fire? Quote. Uraraka, haven't you ever thought that your weightlessness is just squatting down and putting your hands on the ground, which is the point where the whole city is floating? Quote. Li Tian's roll call one by one described all quirks to the point of exaggeration to the extreme. Hearing Li Tian's exaggeration to the extreme, but still can see that they can't help but fall into the description of quirk's shadow, even Bakugo can't help but imagine it in his mind. What's the matter, everyone, haven't you let go of your imagination and imagined your future to the fullest? Li Tian looked at the students who were lost in thought and glanced past, and said in a tone full of temptation. When I first awakened quirks, I imagined my future, imagined myself running faster than anyone, faster than those who teleported quirks, even faster than light. Hearing Li Tian's words, Aizawa Shota, who stood at the front and looked at the route, couldn't help but look back at Li Tian. His gaze was very surprised. Obviously he didn't expect Li Tian to say these words to his classmates. Okay, the unrealistic fantasies can stop first, it will be here soon, everyone get ready. Aizawa Shota clapped his hands and shouted loudly, waking up all the children's shoes who had fallen into fantasies. As for the people who woke up from the beautiful future fantasy described by Li Tian, some were still excited, and some were unavoidably depressed, but without exception, in the eyes of these 15 or 16-year-old boys and girls, suddenly what's more? As for what is extra? Who knows? Li Tian shrugged his shoulders. USJ, the full name is Simulated Disaster Accident Site. It is a disaster drill and accident site that integrates disasters such as flood disasters, fire disasters, sand disasters, storm disasters, and various villains attacks that exist in the imagination. As for the person in charge, it is Space Heroes number 18, a hero who is active in the front line of rescue and disaster relief, and has extremely rich rescue experience. After everyone got off the bus, Li Tian got off at the end. I'm curious, Li Tian, why do you want to tell everyone that unrealistic fantasy? What exactly do you want to do? Aizawa Shota asked in a low voice when Li Tian passed by. He knew that Li Tian's way of thinking is not the level of an ordinary student, so he didn't treat Li Tian as a simple student. Unrealistic fantasy. Li Tian shrugged his shoulders and turned his head to look at Aizawa Shota and said casually, 100 years ago, things like quirks were also unrealistic fantasy, weren't they? After speaking, Li Tian turned around and followed the other students. But standing there, a strange color flashed in Aizawa Shota's bloodshot eyes. Quirks. Was a fantasy too. Ah, it's Space Heroes 13. Uraraka exclaimed in excited voice, I like him so much. Hello everyone. In front of the USJ venue, number 13, who was wrapped up like an astronaut, was waving at the students, let's go in. On the 13th, although it is a rescue hero's quirks is a black hole, a horrible quirks that can inhale everything and crush it, so it wraps itself so tightly. On the way to enter USJ with no 13, number 13 also introduced the origin and use of USJ to everyone, which caused a group of children's shoes to scream in surprise. Number 13, where's All Might? Aizawa Shota walked over, frowning and asked in a low voice. That, senior, I heard that he spent too much time on the way to work, and is resting in the lounge now, and the principal seems to have passed by. Number 13 said in a low voice. It's really messy, but since the principal has passed. Aizawa Shota frowned. Forget it, let's start first. Before we start, I still have some words to tell the students. I think everyone should know that my quirks are black holes, which can inhale and crush anything. Number 13 said in a deep voice. Well, it's because of this quirks that we can provide rescue in any disaster. As expected of a professional heroes fan, Green Valley answered immediately. However, these are also quirks that can easily kill people. I think there are similar quirks among all the students. Number 13 said in a very calm tone. But after hearing the words of number 13, the students who were still excited did quiet down. No one had ever told them this so bluntly. And then, number 13 told them in simple and straightforward words what kind of power they possess. I hope all the students can always keep in mind that their quirks are not only for harm, but also for saving. Above, number 13 silently made a gesture of please to the students. And all the students, even Li Tian, couldn't help feeling heavy at the moment. Okay, let's. On the side, Aizawa Shota stepped forward and waved to the crowd feebly, preparing to take the students into USJ formally. However, in the distance, in front of the fountain in the central park of USJ, a cloud of purple-black mist slowly emerged, a pale palm stretched out, grabbed the non-existent threshold, and a palm hung on one face was exposed. Tamura Shigaraki, come on. Inside USJ, a circle of lights on the ceiling flickered crazily, electric sparks flew in all directions, and various measures inside it also began to malfunction. In the central park in the distance, the cloud of fog expanded, and figures walked out of it. On the high platform, condescendingly watching the scene in the distance. Assemble quickly, everyone don't move around. Number 13 protects the students. Aizawa Shota's complexion suddenly changed, and he yelled at everyone while staring down. What's the matter? Kaminari Denki was a little bit taken aback by Aizawa Shota's appearance, and asked in a daze, is this another sudden attack without warning like in the entrance examination? Don't move around, those are villains. Li Tian snapped, Mr. Aizawa. That's what they did, Aizawa Shota said in a deep voice. Li Tian nodded, looked at the figure in the distance, and said in a deep voice, it seems that this is their purpose. Enemy, villains. All the students were startled, looking at the strange figures coming out of the group of Kurogiri below, they couldn't help being surprised. Meanwhile, below, number 13, and Eraserhead. It's strange. According to the class schedule one got a few days ago, All Might should be there. Eyes like golden lines suddenly appeared in the purple-black floating mist. I finally made a plan, but the symbol of peace is not there. Tamura Shigaraki, who was wrapped in palms all over his body, looked at the people on the rooftop in the distance and said distress-edly. If he was still angry because of this kind of thing before, then after his teacher enlightened him, he felt happy about the scene in front of him. Get rid of those students, and All Might should come out. Sikuomu grinned sadly. Accompanied by the voice of Shigongmu, the group of villains who came out also laughed wantonly. That's right, if you catch this group of students and threaten All Might, even All Might can only be obedient. These students are the best knives in our hands. A group of villains stared at the students recklessly, their merciless malice came towards them and oppressed them. However, although immature, they are all students of Xiangyang, the seeds of future heroes. They are not uncomfortable with the malice of these bluffing villains. Villains, what the hell, sneaked into the hero base camp, are these guys stupid? The surprise of seeing villains for the first time passed, and the students present had no fear of villains. Teacher, where is Xiangyang's intrusion siren? Yaoyorozu asked with a frown as she discovered the blind spot again. Of course there are, but, number 13 said in a deep voice. I don't know if there are villains only here, or if they appear in the whole school, but since the siren did not alarm, it means that there are disturbing quirks among them. On the side, he said in a deep voice, there is still a distance from here. The main campus is not close, and knowing our class time. Although these people are stupid, they are not fools. They are surprise attacks planned for a certain purpose. The siren should have been disturbed. The villains should have prepared quirks from the radio department in advance. Aizawa Shota took 2 steps forward and said in a deep voice, on the 13th lead all the students out of USJ, and protect the students to evacuate safely, try to contact the school. But teacher, if you are alone. Looking at Aizawa Shota's meaning, it was obvious that he was preparing to deal with the enemy alone. Green Valley Izuku took a step forward. Eraserhead's fighting method is to eliminate the quirks of villains and then capture them, but there are so many villains, no matter how many quirks are eliminated, it is still impossible to fight. Aizawa Shota looked at Green Valley coldly and shouted, you only have one skill, but you can't become a hero now. You retreat immediately, this is not a drill. Yaoyorozu Wan, can you make a tracker? It needs to have a strong signal and be extremely concealed. Li Tian, who had already turned his head to prepare, suddenly asked in a low voice. This. Yaoyorozu was taken aback for a moment. Can you? Li Tian turned his head to look at Tamura Shigaraki, Kurogiri, and Nomu in the distance and said in a deep voice. At this time, Aizawa Shota had already rushed into the villains' siege. The special capture cloth is assisting him in eliminating quirks. Even if there are many villains, there is no single enemy for him. However, there are too many villains. Yes, but it will take some time. Yaoyorozu Wan said hastily. Then start production now. No matter what happens, don't stop. I will take the initiative to find you later. Remember, the tracker must not be seen by the villains. Li Tian said softly. Yaoyorozu Wan nodded hastily. It's really tricky to eliminate quirks. These gangsters are no match for professional heroes at all. In the Central Park, Shigaraki looked at Aizawa Shota's figure and said softly, then turned his head and glanced at the high platform and said in a low voice, Kurogiri, let's get started. Understood. Kurogiri responded, looking at Aizawa Shota not far away. His eyes flashed, and he picked out the moment when Aizawa Shota stopped quirks, and his figure turned into a vortex and disappeared out of thin air. Oops. Surrounded by dozens of villains, Aizawa Shota was stunned, and the Kurogiri who sent quirks disappeared, and Aizawa Shota thought of something in a flash, and wanted to rush to the high platform. However, again, there are too many villains. Even if he is not Aizawa Shota's opponent, it is not a problem just to hold him down. On the high platform at the entrance, a swirling mass of Kurogiri appeared out of nowhere, and rapidly expanded to block the way forward. It's our first meeting, we're League of Villains. Kurogiri looked at the students in front of him and number 13 said in a deep voice, excuse me for interrupting, this visit to Heroic Academy is to completely kill the symbol of peace, All Might. Originally All Might should appear here, but now it seems that something has changed. Well, this has nothing to do with me, my task is just to take all of you. Go to hell. At the front, Bakugo and Kirishima charged straight ahead and launched an attack. Get out of the way. Number 13 looked at the two students rushing out, and shouted hastily. Smoke and dust rose from the explosion. It's really impulsive. Li Tian watched the movements of the two and shook his head secretly. After all, he was just a student, and he didn't see that both the enemy were delaying their big moves. Kurogiri is preparing to send all the students away in one breath, while number 13 is accumulating strength, trying to suck away all the other students and crush them in one breath. As for Li Tian, he glanced at Yaoyorozu who was waiting for the tracker to be completed. It's dangerous. In the smoke and dust raised by the explosion, Kurogiri's voice came, and the smoke dispersed, and everyone watched pieces of purple-black mist that were blown into pieces quickly spread out, wrapping everything around tightly. My task is to break up all of you and kill them one by one. Kurogiri's voice came again. And the purple-black mist surging around, as everyone who has seen the scene from villains with their own eyes, they naturally understand what it is. It can't be separated. Li Tian looked at Kurogiri in front of him and his heart moved. Although there were no casualties in this incident in the original book, the plot is the plot, and accidents may happen at any time. Crackle. The golden arc danced. Whoosh. All the people present only felt a blur in front of their eyes, and then Kurogiri in front of them had dissipated. This is. Bakugo, who was the first to react, was startled, looking at the black misty area on the other side, which guy's quirks. The students in Class A present also realized that Li Tian was the only one who could have this speed. Disappeared. Teleportation. No, it was too fast, I couldn't see it. In the mist, the student who suddenly disappeared made Kurogiri startled, and then looked at the traces of leaving on his Kurogiri teleportation space low voice. Iida-san, take Kaminari and run out of the influence range of the other party's radio system quirks to contact the hero school. Li Tian stepped forward and said in a deep voice. Contact the school. On the side, Iida also reacted, Student Li Tian, but your quirks is the fastest, it shouldn't be you. Stop talking nonsense. Li Tian snorted, the distance to contact the school is not far away. After contacting, the teachers will arrive at the same time. The difference of more than 10 seconds doesn't matter at all, but these villains, if there is no obstruction, you will not be able to escape. After the words fell, Li Tian didn't say any more, and instantly turned into a golden light and disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. Student Li Tian, hurry up. Number 13 stepped forward and said hastily. Is it just you? A speed that even I can't catch. Kurogiri looked at Li Tian, who suddenly appeared in front of him in a red and gold light helmet, and said in a deep voice, "A student has such a speed, he is indeed a hero, even students should not be underestimated. But, physical attacks are useless to me, so speed. It's too long-winded." Li Tian looked at Kurogiri, who started to talk nonsense as soon as he appeared, and when he moved his footsteps, his body was instantly enveloped in supernatural speed, and he rushed straight into the mass of Kurogiri. In extreme speed mode, Li Tian's dynamic vision has already far exceeded the limit of human beings. After running a few laps in the Kurogiri, he found the metal armor like a net guard covered by Kurogiri. "I found it." Li Tian rushed forward, grabbed the thing, and threw it to the ground forcefully. The speed force suddenly stopped. Perhaps because of the transmission of quirks and the fact that the physics department is almost immune, Kurogiri's combat experience is quite lacking. Even if Li Tian didn't know Kurogiri's weakness from his previous life, he can clearly find it from the attack of Bakugo and Kirishima just now, a weakness. Boom! Being thrown to the ground at a speed far exceeding Mach 2, Kurogiri lost consciousness without even making a sound. The dense Kurogiri around him dissipated in an instant, and on the ground, in the center of a pothole with a diameter of several meters, Kurogiri regained his human form and fell into a coma in the pothole. "Come back quickly." The voice of number 13 fell. Boom. "Teacher number 13, I'll leave this guy to you." Li Tian dropped a sentence and disappeared in front of number 13 in an instant. And number 13 stood in place, looked at the unconscious Kurogiri figure thrown in front of him, then looked down at the golden figure scurrying around surrounded by villains, and squatted silently, pick it up and turn around. "Students, retreat, and Iida-san just now, rush out with Kaminari and contact the school." Number 13 shouted loudly. "That guy." Bakugo looked at the looming golden light below from a distance, and clenched his hands tightly into fists. He and Kirishima attacked together, but affected no 13's attack, and villains seized the opportunity and almost wiped out the group. As a result, in the blink of an eye, that villains was thrown in front of them. This kind of thing. How can he be willing to do this kind of thing? Bakugo gritted his teeth, the moment he was about to rush down. "If you rush down now, you may be expelled by Shangying." Hong walked by Bakugo's side and left a sentence coldly. Bakugo woke up suddenly, turned his head to look at Hong, who was trotting towards the exit, looked at the somewhat whitish fist clenched by the other party, and gritted his teeth. With a low growl, Bakugo reluctantly followed the other students and ran towards the outside of USJ. Although Li Tian couldn't be seen, Aizawa Shota immediately understood what was going on when he saw the surrounding villains collapse for no reason. "Li Tian, didn't I tell you to retreat?" Aizawa Shota kicked the villains away and shouted sharply. "Let's go." The figure of Li Tian appeared beside Aizawa Shota, clenched his fist with his right hand and placed it by his side, and then swung his fist suddenly. The fist, which surpassed the speed of sound, set off a gust of wind in an instant, blowing all the villains on one side fly. "After you're gone, will you come to collect the body for Mr. Aizawa later?" Li Tian twitched. "Our Class A finally got used to your teaching method, Mr. Aizawa. We wouldn't get used to it if we had a different class teacher." "Who told you that I would die?" Aizawa Shota turned his back to Li Tian, staring at him. Several villains in front of him lost their quirks in an instant, and were then kicked out by him. On the other side, Li Tian still repeated the previous action, punched at full speed, and set off a strong wind to blow away all the villains on one side. "I just took down an important person from villains. This group of people came for All Might. No two brushes dare to play like this. Mr. Aizawa thinks that if you hit the trap aimed at All Might, it will be what's the end?" Li Tian said without looking back. Aizawa Shota is silent. For All Might's trap, even if that kind of trap is impossible to deal with All Might, but for Hero S, a non-direct combat type of him, isn't that sprinkled water? "Okay teacher, don't think too much, I'm here to take you to escape at a critical time. Killing the enemy is not enough, but escaping, I'm better than All Might." Li Tian grinned and punched the whole place with a supersonic punch fly. That kid. Not far away, Sigengmu narrowed his eyes, staring at Li Tian, who suddenly appeared, with a hint of vigilance in his eyes. He didn't see how Li Tian appeared just now, and he couldn't understand the villains who fell silently before, and the howling wind blown by the invisible punches just now. What quirks are these? Nikugaraki frowned in thought. However, before he could think too much, he suddenly noticed the scene on the high platform in the distance. The fleeing students, the open door in the distance, and the two looming figures from behind, and Kurogiri, who was in a coma and was about to leave. Kurogiri. Nigaragi glared, scratched his neck frantically with his right hand, scarlet bloodshots emerged one after another, and roared in a low voice, "It was defeated by a group of students and a rescue hero. You are really useless. Some students have already escaped, which means that other professional heroes will come to support soon. We have no chance of winning against dozens of professional heroes." Mew suddenly became quiet. Game over, the game is over. Nomu, kill these two people, then take Kurogiri back, and go back. Shigaraki calmly ordered Nomu, who looked like a humanoid dinosaur beside him. Hiss. Nomu let out a low growl, and his gigantic body instantly exploded with a terrifying speed that didn't match it, rushing towards Li Tian and Aizawa Shota at high speed. Not good. Li Tian couldn't help but twitched his brows, and instantly entered the Speed Force mode, picked up Aizawa Shota, who was on the side, turned around and ran, and left the position just now, turned Aizawa Shota's direction, and then turned to look over there. Then the corners of Li Tian's mouth twitched involuntarily. A huge dilapidated pothole has appeared where the two of them were just now. If the two of them were still there just now, they would definitely become small pancakes. And what caused all that was that sluggish-looking monster like a humanoid dinosaur, Nomu. Seeing Nomu, who stood up and rushed over again, Li Tian activated the Speed Force without hesitation. Let's not talk about supersonic punches, even super inertial punches that speed up the run up in advance. I'm afraid they won't break the defense. Li Tian couldn't help but click his tongue. It should be said that it is a monster transformed to fight against All Might. It was horrible. To be able to escape, you have some ability, but how many times can you escape? Sigenmu sneered. Escape a few times, I can escape. Bah, retreat strategically, I can play strategically retreat all afternoon. Li Tian curled his lips. This time, because Nomu is far away from here, Li Tian didn't rush to move Aizawa Shota away, but observed Nomu. I saw that in Li Tian's Speed Force world, unlike other people or things that were almost stationary around him, the monster Nomu was still running towards this side at a speed that was visible to the naked eye, although it was slow. This is the first time Li Tian saw this scene in the world of Speed Force. As expected of a monster transformed to fight against All Might, Li Tian narrowed his eyes slightly, thinking. Hey, Li Tian looked at Nomu and suddenly sneered, I don't believe it, your whole body defense is so hard. With an idea, Li Tian started instantly, and rushed towards Nomu, and then walked about 10 meters in front of Nomu without slowing down. Flying in the air, he raised his leg and aimed at Nomu's some lifeline, and then mercilessly disarmed the Speed Force at the moment when he was about to get close. When Li Tian rushed over, he had already faintly touched the inertia carried by the terrifying speed of Mach 3, coupled with Nomu's full sprint. Slap, chicken and egg beat. Aizawa Shota in the distance and Tamura Shigaraki on the other side reacted at the same time as a man would appear, legs clamped and hands fisted. This is too ruthless. Aizawa Shota murmured with the corners of his eyes twitching, and then silently changed Li Tian from his original student to a person not to be provoked. On the other hand, even knowing that Nomu has shock-absorbing quirks, Shikuragi couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. I don't know if it can also absorb the shock. Shikuragi was suddenly curious. No, he was concerned about Nomu. However, even if he has become a reformed person without thought, but a man is a man, this unbearable pain is deeply engraved deep in the genes of all men. Even if he becomes Nomu, where it is broken, he should kneel down, have to kneel. At this time, Li Tian activated the Speed Force and left Nomu's side far away. Seeing Wudang kneeling on the ground and screaming wildly, Nomu sneered coldly, absorbing the quirks. Even if your quirks are awesome, I don't believe at the position where you can still absorb the indescribable features of the eyes can also absorb the impact, and it is not a hard work. Besides, don't talk about iron as work, even steel is work, and the master of alloy work will also kick you out. Looking at Nomu, who knelt down and then raised his head and yelled, Nigaragi had already got the answer, that is, he could not absorb it. Shangli, there are still such vicious students. Shigaraki's heart trembled. seeing Nomu, who had recovered through super regeneration quirks and no longer raised his head and roared, he really couldn't bear to give the order to continue attacking Li Tian. Recovered so quickly. Li Tian looked at Nomu, who had instinctively roared for a few seconds before regaining his composure, and who began to grow out slowly with super regeneration, and was speechless. On the other side, Aizawa Shota couldn't help but look at the scene of super regeneration in front of him. Oh no, he couldn't help but feel surprised. He definitely didn't activate quirks to eliminate the useless idea of quirkless in his brain. Nomu, leave them alone, go and recapture Kurogiri, and then go back after killing a few students at random. Nekorigi turned his face away, and couldn't bear to watch the scene of a big hole in the crotch of his trousers, and the coldness of the egg in the wind. Not good. Hearing the order of dead Kuraki, Li Tian and Aizawa Shota both noticed Nomu's movements at the same time. But, compared to Aizawa Shota, who only had time to turn his head and exclaim, Li Tian, on the other hand, opened up his supernatural speed and power, and suddenly burst out at that 100 times speed, rushing out. Time seemed to stop flowing. In Li Tian's world, everyone slowed down, only the jet-black dinosaur like Nomu was still moving forward slowly. This kind of monster-level power is not something that he can shake at all, but if he doesn't shake the other party's power, the other party will rush directly to his group of classmates and start killing. It seems that I can only hope that the material this equipment company prepared for me is hard enough. Li Tian used his skill to buckle the armor on his waist, revealing a simple lock. The rope as thick as a thumb was directly pulled out by Li Tian. Arrest rope, that is, the carbon fiber and special alloy wrapped around Aizawa Shota's body is made of arresting weapons. This was a special requirement that Li Tian added when designing the battle suit, in order to give full play to his speed advantage, so that he could directly and quickly tie up the villains. However, after obtaining the battle suit, Li Tian thought of another way to use it. In ancient times, there was a not-so-famous but cruel punishment in which a person's hands or feet were tied to a horse, and then the horse galloped. Although it is very unsightly, but this is the only way now. Various thoughts flashed through his mind quickly, and Li Tian appeared next to Nomu with the rope in his hand, and quickly tied the rope. On Nomu's feet, hit a snap button. At the moment when Li Tian's strength exploded when he ran, the buckle would tighten and tie Nomu's feet tightly together, so that even if he had strength, he couldn't use it. This is also a helpless move. After all, even with 100 times the sprint speed, Li Tian can't guarantee that the sprint strength will be comparable to Nomu's. Run. With the capture rope around his waist, Li Tian turned his head and ran sideways at full speed. However, the catching rope was tense instantly, around Li Tian's waist and around Nomu's ankle. Feeling Nomu behind him, who was as immovable as a mountain range, Li Tian's forehead was bulging with veins, and his eyes were full of disbelief. Now he is not pushing Nomu with his body contact with force, but with the help of the rope and the huge inertia brought by the terrifying speed that has faintly approached Mach 3. It is not the direction of force that is completely opposite to Nomu, but the direction of the force is sideways. Azimuth, he still can't move Nomu. Give me, move. Li Tian gritted his teeth, and moved his feet quickly. The solid concrete floor was faintly worn away by Li Tian at this time. Li Tian growled, although it was expected, but it was too low. After using the speed force, he has a speed of Mach 3, but his body is too weak compared to Nomu. Moreover, what Li Tian doesn't know at this time is that with Nomu's strength, Li Tian can't completely surpass the opponent in terms of speed at this time. In Li Tian's world of speed and power, the opponent can still advance slowly. That's the proof. Therefore, the moment Li Tian started to run, Nomu had already reacted and fought with all his strength. Whether he was not dragged away by Nomu is already a proof of Li Tian's strength at this time. Go back. I'll start. Exercising crazily. Li Tian bent down and lowered his head, gritted his teeth and let out a low growl with these words. Then the direction of Li Tian's feet turned abruptly. This time it was not in the direction of Nomu, but rushed out in the same direction as Nomu. If sideways isn't enough to pull on Nomu, along with you, but moving in the same direction, when the speed of one party completely exceeds that of the other, and there is a rope connected in the middle, then Nomu, who was originally immovable to Li Tian, collapsed at the moment Li Tian changed direction. Backup plan, success. Li Tian sensed the sudden drop of resistance behind him, and a smile appeared on his face instantly. It's driving you crazy, it's driving you crazy. Li Tian was running fast, the rope around his waist was stretched tight, pulling Nomu behind him to slide on the ground. Backup plan, success. Li Tian sensed the sudden drop of resistance behind him, and a smile appeared on his face instantly. It's driving you crazy, it's driving you crazy. Li Tian was running fast, the rope around his waist was stretched tightly, pulling the tied legs of Nomu behind him and rubbing against the ground. Li Tian turned his head and looked at the frantic rubbing on the ground, and encountered some stones that Li Tian deliberately set up, and Nomu, who was unscathed when he bumped into it, couldn't help gritting his teeth. It's really thick skin. Li Tian ran around the territory of USJ Nuoda for several laps, and as a result, Nomu's skin behind him wasn't even scratched. Back to normal. Li Tian looked behind and had already reacted, and slowly sat up in the high-speed pull, and was about to talk to Nomu with his hands on the rope, and couldn't help but cursed secretly. If Nomu caught the rope and exploded his strength, if so, then he can start running. He had only seen the power of Nomu just now. Click it. Realizing this, Li Tian untied the rope around his waist neatly. Nomu, who had been being pulled by Li Tian, flew out the moment Li Tian let go of the rope, and directly hit the sand disaster simulation site in the distance at a speed of Mach 2. Nomu could not run with all his strength. With Nomu's terrifying mass and a speed of Mach 2, this impact is definitely no less than a missile detonation. The entire sand disaster simulation site was shaken, and even without starting the machine, it had already caused a not weak sand disaster. Mr. Aizawa, why don't we retreat? Li Tian suddenly appeared beside Aizawa Shota, gasped and twitched the corner of his mouth. There is a super monster on the other side, it's completely defenseless. Super monster. Nomu. Hearing the words of Li Tian, who suddenly appeared, Shikurigi also reacted suddenly, and looked towards the exploding sand disaster in disbelief. He had no idea that Nomu would be overwhelmed by a student here. Who the hell is the super monster, Walt? Super monster. Aizawa Shota looked at Li Tian, who came back, and Nomu, who disappeared, and naturally understood who he was talking about. He couldn't help but looked up at the sand disaster site where the explosion occurred, and said in a deep voice with a frown, "Then guy, is it that strong?" Strong, of course strong. Li Tian couldn't help complaining. I dragged him from the ground and ran around USJ 3 times. Grinding out a smooth runway. Aizawa Shota twitched the corner of his mouth, listening to Li Tian's explanation, and then looked at Nomu, who came out from the sand disaster site over there, with no visible injuries. He probably understood what level of monster Nomu was. To be honest, if we retreat, Li Tian, can you take all of us to retreat safely? Aizawa Shota asked in a deep voice, thinking of the speed that Nomu burst out before. Of course, can't. Li Tian gasped. Hearing the first half of the sentence, Aizawa Shota was just about to breathe a sigh of relief, but was almost blown away by the second half. The speed of that monster is not slow. If I were alone, it would not be difficult to run, but with the 19 students in our class and you 2 teachers, I would have to run back and forth at least 10 times to evacuate. 20 times, with the speed of that monster. If you want to kill people, the 3 groups of people I moved away in the end are very dangerous. Li Tian explained in a deep voice. That's why he took Aizawa Shota and his classmates to retreat without saying anything. Move all the students away first, and I will break up with No. 13. Aizawa Shota said without hesitation. With all due respect, the opponent's strength and speed are completely superior to yours, teacher. Even if you can eliminate the opponent's quirks, and join forces with No. 13, I'm afraid it won't last a few seconds. Li Tian refused without hesitation. Road. The corner of Aizawa Shota's mouth twitched. The feeling of being complained about by the students for being weak was really uncomfortable. Then what do you say? Aizawa Shota asked in a deep voice. You want me to say? Li Tian suddenly grinned with a bloodthirsty expression, and said in a deep voice, Teacher, give me permission, I will kill these 2 guys directly, at my speed, as long as I find the right place. It will be considered that monster no matter how meaty it is, it can be easily resolved. The moment he heard Li Tian's words, Shigaraki, who was astonished that Nomu was defeated by a student, shuddered for a moment, and turned his head to stare at Li Tian. No, absolutely not. Aizawa Shota refused without hesitation. you are only a student now, you must not kill anyone. Hey, forget it. Li Tian put away the murderous intent in his eyes, and smiled, as if he wasn't the one who was so murderous just now. Li Tian's change made Aizawa Shota and Shikuragi startled. He turned his head to look at Shigongmu, glanced up and down, then stared at an indescribable place, and said playfully, "Hey, you guys, why don't you give up what you just thought? Otherwise, I think you probably don't have the resilience of that monster." Sensing where Li Tian's gaze was staring at, Shigongmu trembled instantly. His face covered by his big hand was full of horror, but looking at Li Tian's playful smile, he shouted sharply, "I don't believe you will give up the lives of my classmates came to attack me." Although Shikuragi's voice was loud and imposing, he stopped Nomu without hesitation. He was obviously a fool, and his heart was full of fear. Li Tian, Nomu, and Tamura Shigaraki faced each other, and the scene became stalemate for a while. However, whether it is Li Tian or Shigongmu, they are actually procrastinating, waiting, and gambling. Bet on whether the hero S came first, or Kurogiri woke up first and escaped to save Shigaraki. Time passed by every minute and every second. In the blink of an eye, 30 seconds passed. Eraser head. The loud voice of Present Mike came from the door of USJ. Everyone's eyes could not help but be attracted, and then everyone's expression changed, because the person standing beside Present Mike is All Might. How could it be so fast? Shigaraki's expression changed instantly. The scene he least wanted to see appeared. If it was Hero S from other professions who came to support, then with Nomu's deterrent force, maybe the stalemate could continue, but if it was All Might who came, then the next result. It's fine, why do I have to ask? Because I'm here. All Might appeared on stage with a face full of anger, with Haki's opening words. Then, looking at the stalemate picture below, he couldn't help being stunned. There is nothing wrong with villains invading, but it seems a bit different from what he imagined. A captive caught by number 13, a group of villains who fell in USJ, Li Tian, Shikuraki and Nomu who were confronting each other, and Aizawa Shota who was watching the show, rubbing his eyes and yawning. Dazed as dazed, but All Might didn't hesitate at all in his actions. He took off and jumped directly from the entrance of USJ to the middle of the stalemate among the three. Seeing the arrival of All Might, Aizawa Shota on the side suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. Even Li Tian, although there was a hint of disappointment in his expression, he was relieved. He kept confronting Nomu and Shikuragi without any slack. It's the same with Li secretly resting a few times. All Might. Nigaragi stared at All Might with his eyes between his palms and fingers, full of anger and unwillingness. Is it over like this? Sugumu couldn't help but despair. And just when Shigaraki was in despair because of the arrival of All Might, but the others were relieved, an accident happened. A cloud of purple-black mist instantly condensed behind Shigaraki, swallowing Shigaraki before everyone could react, and the only remaining eye in Kurogiri was staring at. Li Tian's eyes were filled with extreme anger and unwillingness. Not good. Everyone's heart trembled, and then they rushed over there. However, the dead wood that was swallowed by Kurogiri disappeared without a trace, and the cloud of mist dissipated directly in place. This is Kurogiri. Even Li Tian couldn't help being startled, and turned his head to look in the direction of the entrance in the distance. There, number 13 and the other students were in a mess, and it was clear that Kurogiri had escaped. It seems that Kurogiri didn't fall into a coma at the beginning, but was just waiting for a chance to escape because he was afraid of my speed. Li Tian thought for a while, and shook his head involuntarily after he understood the key. Because of the body of mist, how to judge the unconscious Kurogiri, whether it is Li Tian or number 13, has no experience at all, so it was a mistake. But that's okay, the escaped Sugumu and Kurogiri are good villains for Li Tian. After all, the tracker has already been pressed on. It's just a shame Nomu. Li Tian turned his head to look in Nomu's direction, and then saw All Might vigilantly facing Nomu's constant warnings. Villains, don't move, or I won't be polite. All Might put on a posture and yelled at Nomu. However, Nomu just froze in place, motionless. Villains, just hold your hands. All Might, that guy probably doesn't have his own consciousness, and won't move without orders. Li Tian shouted loudly. No order, no movement. All Might froze, looked at Nomu who was frozen in place, blinked, scanned, and found that it seemed to be true. Haha, It seems that the villains ran away too hastily, and forgot to take him away or give a big order. All Might did not lose Haki's laughter. However, whether it is Li Tian or Aizawa Shota, listening to this laughter, no matter how you listen, how embarrassing it is. Chapter 31. In that shabby bar, the figure of Nikoragi tumbled out of the vortex of Kurogiri's avatar. That fool! Nigaragi gritted his teeth, and hammered the ground angrily. If it wasn't for that fool, this time, All Might, this false society failed. Onforal's unsurprising voice came from the TV in the bar. As All Might's old opponent, One for All deeply understands how strong All Might, who defeated him, is. It's down. Not to mention, it never occurred to him to kill All Might. Teacher, this is different from what you said. Nikaragi turned around, looked at the TV with no images and roared in a low voice. In that school, there was a student among the group of students whose speed was far faster than Nomu's, brat above All Might. The speed is far above All Might. This time, even One for All couldn't help being taken aback. Sir, that brat's speed may indeed be higher than All Might. He ran, and I didn't even have a reaction, and he was captured. And when he was fighting Nomu, he completely relied on his speed to defeat Nomu. Just kidding around. If it wasn't for the arrival of All Might that made the brat relax for a moment, it might be difficult to escape this time. On the side, Kurogiri, who put on a high-necked suit, said respectfully. You said that Nomu, which the old man and Mr. cooperated with, was played with speed. How is this possible? Another distraught voice came from the TV. You know that in order to achieve the level you said, the speed must be at least up to what extent? 2 Mach, at least twice the speed of sound, and it must be the kind of speed that is completely controlled by people, not just a simple speed. That is to say, the speed of that brat is at least 2 Machs. Shigaraki said in a low voice. 2 Machs, it's really fast enough. On the TV, the voice of One for All came over. The muffler may be a sensitive word, so, the name of Saidangmu will be changed to Saidangmu Muffler in the future. You know what was the biggest mistake you made this time? The biggest mistake. Dead Karaki's voice didn't hesitate at all. The biggest mistake is that I didn't destroy that brat. Well, it's the kid you mentioned. One for All didn't care about Shigaraki's tone, but Chun-Chun taught, a kid with that kind of strength will definitely be very famous in Xiangyang, so just a little investigation, I can get information about that brat. Ambush and surprise attack are supposed to appear when the information of the enemy is suppressed. You know, they don't know, then you can ambush the opponent, launch a surprise attack, and stand on the initiative. But this time, although it was unintentional, but there is no doubt that it was Xiangyang's information that suppressed you and surprised you. Surprise attack, information, Sigangmu said to himself in a low voice, with thoughtful eyes showing in his eyes. That's right, this time, if you know the information about that fast kid in advance, then you only need to set a trap in advance, and you can easily get rid of that student. One for All kept saying this time failure case educator Deadwood. For him, failure once or twice doesn't matter at all. On the contrary, educating Sakanaki well is his biggest thing now. Onforal's earnest education lasted for half an hour, and One for All stopped talking unhappily. Seeing the communication that had been shut down, Shigaraki heaved a sigh of relief. At some point, his cold and seldom talking teacher had the intention of transforming into a gossip woman. It's all that brat's fault. Sigangmu couldn't help but gritted his teeth and hated, next time we meet, that brat. Pa-ta, pa-ta. There was a sound of small stones falling to the ground. Kurogiri, what are you doing? Nekugaraki looked at Kurogiri angrily. Ah, sorry, it seems that because of the previous battle, a lot of small stones were put into the armor. Kurogiri held the armor around his neck in his hand and apologized, because of the haste to retreat, it was Mr. Lecture, so I endured until now. You really can bear it. Sigangmu looked at the black line at the end of the 7 or 8 cement stones that fell on the ground. Fortunately, my body is fog after all. Even the solid part is semi-fog. Although it will be a little uncomfortable, it can be tolerated. Kurogiri buckled the small stone in the gap of the armor, and then brought it back to Bonek's superior. It's much more comfortable. This armor is the most suitable one for me. If it breaks, I'll be in trouble. Dead Handwood, wait and clean up yourself. All Might, how did you come here so fast? Li Tian stepped forward and asked a little strangely. From the invasion of villains to the end now, although it sounds like a long time, in fact, less than 3 minutes have passed. Including the time for Ida and Kaminari to leave the signal shielding area and call for help, it is also, that is to say, Xiangying reacted within 30 seconds and sent support to the scene. He couldn't believe that Xiangying's security measures would be so strong, otherwise, how could such a situation appear in the original book? Haha, because I'm in the lounge not far away. As soon as the principal received the call, I rushed over. As for Mr. Mike and Mr. Sharpshooter, All Might said, Li Tian also turned his head to look at a villain who was so helpless to fight back with a loud roar, making the other with a gun in his hand to easily penetrate the villains hidden in various disaster simulation areas in the distance hands and feet. Except for Nomu, who was left behind, the remaining dozens of gangsters were easily suppressed and subdued by 2 professional heroes' teachers. They have been following us all the time. After all, what happened a few days ago, so there will be 5 to 8 teachers following behind the class that needs to be taught at a place a little far away from Xiangying these days. This time there are only 2. It's just because All Might is the teacher of this class, in the end. Xiaoda walked over and looked at the immobile Nomu and said lightly. Ha, ha. All Might scratched his head uncomfortably and laughed dryly twice. So that's how it is. Li Tian nodded knowingly. It's no wonder that there will be support coming so soon. By the way, what's the situation with this guy? He won't act unless he obeys orders. All Might asked Nomu, shifting the subject. It should be the product of a modified person or other similar experiments. It's unbelievably strong, but it doesn't have any consciousness. Without the order of the guy who escaped just now, it can't act on its own at all. Aizawa Shota replied. This time, if Li Tian didn't threaten with words and speed to make that guy dare not move and give orders, I'm afraid this incident would not end so easily. Hearing Aizawa Shota's words, Li Tian couldn't help but smile. How could he fail to realize that Aizawa-sensei was trying to excuse him? After all, he has not obtained a temporary license, and without explicit permission, he has beaten many villains by hand, which is an illegal act. It's unbelievably strong. Is this guy? All Might didn't pay attention to Li Tian's affairs. He still didn't know the whole story of the development of the matter, but was surprised by the seriousness of Nomu and Aizawa Shota's words. I'm afraid it's comparable to you. Glancing at All Might, Aizawa Shota said coldly, after all, this time, villains' goal is to kill you, a symbol of peace, in hero. A cyborg who can compete with me. And the target is me. All Might said with a solemn expression. It seems that this matter does not end so easily. If this guy is really a cyborg, then with the organization of this technique, you can find the signal receiver that Yaoyorozu wants to track later. Li Tian said suddenly. Tracking signal receiver. All Might and Aizawa Shota were taken aback at the same time. Yeah, Li Tian nodded and said, when the villains appeared and saw the misty quirks, I was on guard against them running away, so I asked Yaoyorozu to make a few small tracking devices. During the battle, I just hid in the gap in the armor of Kurogiri's neck, and I probably couldn't find it if I didn't search carefully. Having said that, Li Tian paused, pointing to Nomu who was beside him with a look of pity, and said, actually, I also hid a tracker on this guy. If they are taken back together, maybe the harvest will be greater. You were reckless. If you want to find the base of villains, as long as you are in this country, you can't find it. It will take a little time at most. Aizawa Shota frowned, and said in a deep voice, but the tracker, if the villains finds out, they will scare the snake away. If the opponent abandons the base and hides in Tibet, it will be bad. Li Tian looked at Aizawa Shota, who was frowning, and All Might, who was similar, and shrugged helplessly. So in your hearts, am I such a reckless person? Of course I know such things as being able to scare the snake away. Li Tian angrily took out 2 or 3 irregular small stone-like things from his arms and said, no, this is the tracker. When it was manufactured, I asked Yaoyorozu to make it in such a secret way. Besides, this tracker will only send a positioning signal after it is remotely activated. Usually, if you don't deliberately break it open, it is just like ordinary pebbles. I mixed several pebbles and put them in together. After all, the Kurogiri body I pushed him directly into the ground. Isn't it normal to have 1 or 2 extra pebbles on his body? Since the villains has escaped, if Yaoyorozu did as I said, he should have activated the signal tracker and found the location of those 2 people. Li Tian shrugged and said, haha, so that's the case, then I'll go find the Yaoyorozu Wana signal tracker later. All Might laughed and said, young man Li Tian, you really did a great job this time. However, it's still too impulsive. Aizawa Shota said in a deep voice, next time, we need to discuss with the professional heroes before doing this kind of thing. Hey, I see. Li Tian scratched his head helplessly and replied. By the way, that guy. Li Tian pointed to Nomu beside him, his tracker should be somewhere on his back. When he was thrown away, that guy flew past me, looking at he has a wound on his back, so he stuffed the tracker in it casually so as not to cause any misunderstanding after handing it over to the police. Li Tian spread his hands and said that it was the fault of his hands, what he did, not him. Outside the USJ venue, Class A, except for Li Tian, everyone else gathered here. I don't know what's going on inside. There should be no problem with the teacher coming in to support me. Uraraka said with some concern. Li Tian must be fine, he is very strong, he must be fine. Yi Yin clenched his fist up and down with one glove, as if he was firm in his words, but also as if he was praying. Mr. Li Tian will definitely be fine. His quirks can increase his speed dozens of times. If he concentrates on dodging, even if All Might can't hurt Mr. Li Tian in a short time. Compared with Mr. Li Tian, Aizawa the teacher's situation is even more dangerous, but All Might has rushed over, which is a bit more reassuring. But according to the villains who escaped, they came here to kill All Might. Although it's unbelievable, the other party must have mastered some powerful means. At the beginning, Lu Gu seemed to be comforting Yi Yin, but after talking about it, he was immersed in his own world, and the sound of a series of broken thoughts was so small that only he could hear it, but it was very annoying. Stinky. Bakugo couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth when he heard Green Valley's thoughts that kept coming to his ears, and even the anger in USJ couldn't help but shifted to Green Valley. Green Valley sauce, it's scary. Asui, who was expressionless, complained silently. This complaint won the unanimous approval of the students around. Students, you'd better evacuate a little bit back, listen to the voice, there is a fierce battle going on inside now. On the side, number 13 repeatedly persuaded, because he was accidentally run away by Kurogiri before, and with the arrival of All Might, that's why they stopped. But Mr. Mike's yelling from USJ, as well as Mr. Sharpshooter's gunshots, made him nervous involuntarily. Teacher number 13, it's all right. Suddenly, Li Tian's voice sounded from behind No. 13. Li Tian. Yi Yin cried out in surprise, and rushed over directly. This action immediately stopped the other students who were about to come over, and they looked at Yi Yin who had flung himself into Li Tian's arms in astonishment. The innocent girl Yaoyorozu was a little dazed, and she wanted to ask how the situation was going, and how to deal with the signal receiver in his hand. I knew that the two of them were definitely having an affair. Kaminari stared at Li Tian and Yi Yin maliciously, his voice was quite sour. Powerful, quirks is excellent, and now I have a childhood sweetheart. Now, a hateful winner in life. Putao enviously bit the handkerchief, eyes full of envy and jealousy. The other students also looked at Li Tian and Yi Yin in more or less astonishment at this time. Yi Yin, who threw herself into Li Tian's arms impulsively, couldn't help but feel shy with those gazes. If it wasn't transparent, her little face would be as red as a drop of blood. Knowing Bai Yan's shyness, Li Tian didn't say anything, just continued to hold Yi Yin, looked at number 13 and smiled, and said with a light smile, Teacher number 13, the battle situation in USJ has stabilized, Villain S leader escaped, and now Mr. Mike and Mr. Sharpshooter are cleaning up the remaining villains. If you go in now, you may be able to snatch a few heads. This is also the reason why Li Tian came out. Mr. Mike and Mr. Marksman cleared up the other villains, he has no reason to make a move at all, and Aizawa Shota and All Might also need to watch the monster Nomu. Although I know that Nomu can't move without orders, but no one is watching in case the villains comes back to order or just snatch it away. Hearing Li Tian's joking tone, number 13 finally breathed a sigh of relief, as long as he has stabilized. As for Li Tian jokingly going in to grab the head, if it was another profession hero's teacher, maybe he would really go. But he is different, his black hole will kill people at every turn, even in the face of villains, it is too cruel, so he became a professional rescuer heroes. Next, Other support staff from the school quickly felt that the remaining villains in USJ faced so many professional heroes and were taken down with almost no resistance. After all, they also knew that there were no more the odds are good, they are all just discarded children. It didn't take long for the police to feel that the USJ site was here. A total of 78 villains were transported away by several large escort vehicles one after another, and Nomu was transported to the police inspection center alone for testing. After all, they are suspected of transforming people, and this must be confirmed before they can better prepare for the League of Villains, the mastermind of this incident. The signal tracker from Yaoyorozuin was taken away by All Might and Aizawa Shota, and it was kept secret. Even the police rarely knew the existence of this thing. As for the agreement negotiated between the school and the police afterwards, Li Tian and his classmates were not qualified to participate or make suggestions, and they didn't even know the inside story of it. Li Tian, on the other hand, was warned by the police a few times in the end. After all, he used quirks to fight in USJ, but in the end, it depends on the degree of danger of this incident, plus it happened inside the Shangying campus, and a teacher gave Li Tian a warning. In the end, it was just 2 warnings, and nothing happened. Li Tian didn't care about such small things either. But because of what happened today, Shangying asked Class A to end class early and had a day off the next day. And Li Tian didn't mean to take Yi Yin out for training, but comforted Yi Yin all the way, and after sending Yi Yin home, he was also preparing to go home. What happened today had a big impact on him. However, in comparison, what he cares more about is what kind of changes will be caused by his intervention this time. It was the advance of the battle between the gods and the wild, which led to the advance of the war between All Might and All for One, and the early retirement of the symbol of peace, or the thunderous attack of the police and the Shangying community to win the alliance that had not yet developed, so that All for One gave up Shikaragi. It's more likely that there will be a big war, Li Tian secretly thought. Just from the original battle between All for One and All Might, we can see how much the other party attaches importance to Shikaki. All Might retire early. Li Tian thought about it. If All Might retires early, the impact will definitely be enough to wipe out the sharpening effect that this USJ incident did not have on Class A. As for the breakdown of the plot, Li Tian doesn't care too much. This is a real world, not exactly what he saw in his previous life, as if everything was planned, so all developments have infinite possibilities, and whoever believes in plots, then whoever is a big fool. By the way, there is also my aunt. Li Tian suddenly remembered that during the Battle of Shenye, his aunt Yu Shanyu Mt. Lady appeared on the stage, and was also hit by All for One. Although the original book was not killed because of Best Jeanist, the Iron Fist comparable to All Might is not so easy to pick up, and this time it may be killed directly. You still can't relax. As his last relative in this world, Li Tian couldn't possibly cause his aunt to die because of his intervention. We have to pay attention to the situation on Shenya's side, we can't let my aunt have an accident on Shenya's side. Li Tian sighed softly. What's wrong with Kano? The sudden sound made Li Tian startled. Bad, it was heard. Li Tian turned his head to look over, then breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, it's Sister Wai. Why do I suddenly feel you're thinking something very rude? Namely Wai puffed up her cheeks and looked at Li Tian angrily. Forehead. Li Tian couldn't help laughing dryly. Is his intuition so accurate? However, has he already walked home without knowing it? How come? By the way, why did you come back so early today, Sister Wai? Li Tian quickly changed the subject. I don't have any work today, so I went shopping. Namely Wai smiled and opened her hands to show Li Tian a bunch of mini shopping bags in her palm. Sister Wai, are you going shopping by yourself? Where's Auntie? Li Tian asked in surprise. You parked in the garage, I'll be here soon. Namely Wai said and pointed in the direction of the garage. It's a good thing Wai doesn't know how to drive, so my aunt can only park the car. Li Tian couldn't help but heaved a sigh of relief. Sure enough, Namly Wai had already forgotten what he said about Shenye in a blink of an eye. I am so lucky to be Wai. Little Li Tian, you're thinking about being rude again. Namly Wai suddenly turned around and looked at Li Tian angrily. No. Li Tian broke into cold sweat for a moment, and answered dryly, but his eyes were full of disbelief. Could this be a woman's sixth sense? But Namly Wai obviously didn't believe it, and stared at Li Tian with big watery eyes angrily. Yi, what are you doing? Hey, little Li Tian, why are you back? You probably haven't finished school yet. Suddenly, Yu Shanyu's appearance instantly attracted Nanli Yi's attention. In an instant, Li Tian breathed a sigh of relief thankfully, and was saved. Although Nanli Yi is very confused on weekdays, once it really becomes real, it is quite scary. Because a lot of things happened in school today, our class will be dismissed early. While walking, Li Tian briefly talked about what happened in USJ. Xiangying was attacked by the villains. Still want to kill All Might. Was the villain's brain chewed by a dog or kicked by a donkey? Yu Shanyu looked at Li Tian in astonishment. Almost. Li Tian looked at the swearing ant with twitching corners of his mouth and couldn't help but be speechless. However, Tamura Shigaraki's mind is really not very good now. As for the villains organization that attacked Xiangying, the League of Villains, what do you guys think? Sitting at the top of the desk, Mr. Principal said in a low voice with his chin resting on his hands. League of Villains is the Villains League. It's such a straightforward name. Brad King, the head teacher of Class B, Blood Heroes, folded his arms and said in a deep voice, however, this kind of pediatric villains is it necessary for the organization to mobilize so many people? Brad King glanced over. Mr. Principal, Aizawa Shota, Shongshin Sleeper, Present Mike, Kong Wei Sol, Marksman and other elite teachers among heroes, and of course, All Might, all present. That's right. Is it really necessary for a villain who fled in embarrassment after revealing the name of his organization without even leaving his own name behind after appearing on stage for only a few minutes? Shongshin sleeps. Also even the 18 Forbidden Girl heroes Midnight spoke listlessly. Don't underestimate the villains. Aizawa Shota said in a deep voice. The opponent is very strong. This time there were no casualties, and the reason why he defeated the opponent is largely due to Li Tian, a student in my class. Zhen Xuan Li Tian. I remember, he is the number one in this year's test. Kong Wei Sol thought, and said hoarsely. That's right. Mr. Principal nodded with a smile. At that time in the test, that kid showed a speed that was not inferior to All Might and a professional hero's level of fighting power, and, at that time, it was because of the equipment. The opponent's strength has not been fully displayed. According to the latest data, the speed of Zhen Xuan Li Tian has reached the level of Mach 3. Mach 3. 3 times the speed of sound. Are you kidding me? Present Mike said with a look of astonishment. His quirk's noise was based on the use of sound to fight, and suddenly there was a man running faster than the Sound's student. This is called, run faster than your attack. I don't know, Mach 3 is just what Li Tian himself said. After all, Mach 3 is Mach 2, or even Mach 1, I can't see it. Aizawa Shota complained silently. Listening to the voice full of resentment, the other teachers around looked at Aizawa Shota's lifeless look. There was no fluctuation, and they even wanted to laugh a little. Young man Li Tian shouldn't be joking, but, compared to the matter of young Li Tian, what is more important now is the League of Villains. All Might said with a serious face, there are some things behind the scenes of this League of Villains. Secret things. Speaking of this, All Might thought of what his friend Misao Tsukuchi told him earlier. About that cyborg Nomus, check the results. This time, among the captured captives of the League of Villains, there is a monster named Nomu. All Might said in a deep voice, according to the urgent inspection results of the Police Inspection Center, the monster named Nomu, that there are more than 4 kinds of DNA in the body. 4 kinds of DNA, that guy is not human at all. The sharpshooter said in a deep voice. No, the other party is a human being, and more than 2 quirks have been found on it, and definitely more than 2. All Might said, thinking of his old enemy, no, everyone owned by one for all his old enemy all for one. Multiple quirks, All Might, are you sure the police are not joking with us? Immediately, someone exclaimed in astonishment, how could someone own 2 or more quirks in such a thing as quirks? No, I'm not kidding. The whole body of the other party has undergone a large-scale transformation with drugs. In the words of the police, this is a specially transformed person that can carry multiple quirks. All Might said seriously. All Might, what the hell are you trying to say? Some people can see that All Might's words these days are just laying the groundwork for the League of Villains, an organization of villains that is not worthy of the table in their eyes. According to the police, even if someone else's DNA is implanted in the body, as long as the host does not have the characteristics of fusion and penetration, it is impossible to use the quirks in the ingested NDA for its own use. That is to say, the modified human body it was modified to carry multiple quirks, but the multiple quirks of the other party are not the result of modification. Mr. Principal interjected and began to explain. The body is transformed to carry multiple quirks, but the multiple quirks of the other party are not the result of transformation. What does this mean? Some teachers didn't quite understand and asked. But there were also some people who seemed to understand something. Their faces changed slightly, and they looked at All Might and Mr. Principal in disbelief. It means that behind the League of Villains, there is a quirks that can give others quirks. All Might said in a deep voice. Hearing All Might's words, almost everyone's face changed instantly. Quirks that can give others quirks, isn't that? The teachers present are all professional heroes, and most of them are senior professional heroes. Naturally, it is impossible not to know that incomparably terrifying nightmare that once surpassed the neon lights. All for one, that guy has already set his sights on Xiangying because of me. All Might said in a deep voice. All for one, the ruler of the Dark Age who was overthrown by All Might. He's after Xiangying. That's really a headache. Shang Shanshui frowned involuntarily. Even someone like her who became a hero in a time when the Dark Ages had passed would know how terrifying that guy was back then. All for one, I remember that 6 years ago, All Might, you fought the final decisive battle with him, and escaped from the serious injury of the opponent, right? Brad King said in a deep voice. Although the incident back then was not made public, but as professional heroes they have their own sources of information to some extent. Although the details of such incidents are not clear, there probably still are. All Might nodded. When All for One fled back then, the injuries on his body should have been so serious that they couldn't be cured. Even after so many years, the injuries should still be there. It's just like he is still far from his peak state because of his injuries back then. All Might felt the faint pain in his abdomen, and his eyes couldn't help showing a heavy look. In other words, the other party is not in its heyday, right? Someone answered. Having said that, many teachers still frowned with distress. Don't worry, All Might said with a smile. After this incident, the other party will definitely not carry out attacks in the short term, and the police are already searching the villains' base, and are contacting heroes of other professions. Should not take long to launch a counterattack against villains, so please be careful during this time. After the meeting, the other class heroes have dispersed. Only Mr. Principal and the shriveled All Might are still in the conference room. Has it been decided yet? Mr. Principal looked at All Might and said in a deep voice. Yeah, All Might nodded, looking at his shriveled fist, feeling the power of one for all in his body, and said in a deep voice, this time, thanks to Li Tian's actions, I caught that guy Alpharon's tail. At least, before this power disappears, All for One must be completely terminated. This is also to make up for the mistakes I made back then. No one will blame you for that kind of thing. Mr. Principal shook his head and said seriously, overturned that dark age and brought light to this society. You are a symbol of peace. After the USJ incident passed, various courses of action against the League of Villains are being carried out methodically and secretly. In contrast, the fact that a lot of police cars entered and exited Xiangying could not be concealed. Almost in the afternoon, the information that Xiangying was attacked by villains had been completely disseminated, and major TV stations also rushed to report. Although the school was attacked by villains, there were complaints from all walks of life, but fortunately, Class A successfully evacuated this time, and the school's support came in a timely manner, so it seems that the students did not entangle with villains. On this point, all walks of life will not have much influence on Xiangying's senses. However, all of this has nothing to do with Li Tian. All the information about his fight with villains was leaked out without the slightest bit of wind, watching a series of reports on TV. As expected. A smile appeared on the corner of Li Tian's mouth. I am leaving. This kid, after experiencing that kind of attack yesterday, do you still want to go out to exercise today? Originally, I planned to ask for leave today and take him to the amusement park to relax. Yu Shanyu looked at Li Tian's back and said helplessly. Perhaps because of what happened, little Li Tian will train himself more strictly. Namely Yi looked at Li Tian's leaving figure, and said a very philosophical sentence without being confused. That's right. Yu Shanyu nodded, with a smug expression on his face. My little nephew, Yu Shanyu, how could he tremble just because he met villains? Of course he will beat them all up in reverse. But that's a violation of the regulations. Nanli Wei tilted her head, complaining about the lore. Li Tian is not clear about the conversation between his aunt and sister Wei. However, he did start to reflect on the USJ incident. Before, although Li Tian kept saying that strength was a shortcoming, and he did achieve supersonic speed, which uses speed to make up for the shortcoming of strength, but this is still just relying on the speed increase of the speed force. It's not that he never thought about how to exercise his body and let his physical fitness become stronger. Even if All Might wants to pass one for all to Green Valley Izuku, it needs to rely on blunt and tedious training, relying on a long time to polish Green Valley's body little by little. For physical exercise, there is no other way in this world except various boring and basic exercise methods. In the final analysis, this is the world of quirks, the era of quirks, not the world of practice, not the era of practice. It is also for this reason that Li Tian has been repelling and ignoring the point of exercising his body from the bottom of his heart. But this can't be my excuse anymore. Li Tian looked up at the blue sky and sighed in his heart, a flash of determination flashed in his eyes. First year Class A, morning class meeting. Hero Sports Festival. The exclamation of Class A suddenly shook the ceiling. It's finally another school-style event. Kirishima, a pure-blooded idiot, roared excitedly. Wait, Aizawa-sensei, didn't the villain's attack just happen before? Is it really okay for us to have such a leisurely Kaishangyang sports festival? Kaminari slapped Kirishima on the face, then he asked loudly, puzzled. That is, what if we are attacked? Jiro Kyoka also raised his hand and asked. The other students also became more or less flustered at this time. At this time, not to mention the other classmates, even Li Tian was a little confused by Shangyang's coquettish manipulation. Shouldn't it be time to pack up the League of Villains? He has sent all the layers of the League of Villains up there, and there is that Nomu there. It is very likely that the police can analyze that the mastermind behind the scenes is All for One, so shouldn't they gather a group of professional heroes now and spread their arms? It's because of the villain's attack that happened before, although the heroic school's quick response did not cause too much disturbance in the society. Aizawa Shota said this, and he couldn't help but cast a veiled glance at Li Tian. He experienced it personally. Although the attack on USJ was thunderous and rainy, it was dangerous. If one was not careful, it would cause a super sensational incident that would be detrimental to Shangyang. Because the other students retreated in time, they didn't know what kind of exaggerated things Li Tian had done in the USJ venue. This was the tacit understanding between Li Tian and the school in the end, and they jointly concealed the past. But the villains finally invaded Shangyang, which inevitably caused some commotion, so the school is planning to hold a sports festival to explain to all walks of life how indestructible Shangyang's crisis management mechanism is. In terms of security, this year's hero is also the United Police, which has been strengthened 5 times. Aizawa Shota continued. More importantly, the Hero Sports Festival is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. How could it be cancelled just because of villains? Speaking of this, the disdain in Aizawa Shota's voice can be heard by almost every student. No, it's better to stop it. Isn't it just a sports meeting? Or is the villain's attack more terrifying? Putao said with a look of horror. Hey, hasn't Mineta-san seen the Shangyang Sports Festival? Hearing what Putao said was a sports meeting, almost all the students in the class looked at Putao strangely. The Heroes Sports Festival is a super large-scale sports event in the current Quirks era, where the Neon has replaced the Olympic status in the past. Green Valley Kepu said, this is second to none in the entire Neon. I know all of this, but hearing Putao was still flustered. The country's top heroes will rush over to look for talents at that time. No villains will be stupid enough to attack heroes at that time. Yaoyorozu Wan girl opened her mouth and analyzed calmly. Yes, why did you forget this? There will be quite a few professional heroes present at the Hero Sports Festival. There's never been a safer day in the whole Neon world. In case Yaoyorozu reminded everyone was excited and you added one word at a time, and then the panic of the villain's attack soon faded away, and they began to discuss excitedly about the Shangyang Sports Festival. The country's top heroes, combined with the police. The defense force is 5 times that of the past. Li Tian thought about it. If these, in the League of Villains where he and Yaoyorozu one-handed in together the location of the base, and the existence of all for one that the police can check out. Li Tian seemed to understand something. The Hero Sports Festival, Li Tian murmured. Once a year, there are only 3 times in the entire high school. The Hero Sports Festival is definitely a festival that every student who aspires to become a hero cannot miss. If you can enter the famous hero's office, you will have a lot of experience and topics. It is not a small improvement. Aizawa Shota continued. Even though the voice was weak, the words made everyone present enthusiastic. After the class meeting, there is a lunch break after the cultural compulsory courses in the morning. Hero Sports Festival, this is my first step towards becoming a professional heroes. I'm burning up. Nah, no, Kirishima shouted excitedly. Kirishima-chan's quirks are hardening, right? Shouldn't it be me, getting up? Asui unconsciously uttered a nasty joke with a cute face. Asui-chan, how can you say such a thing? Jiro's girl's face turned red instantly, and she screamed in disbelief. Quack. Asui tilted his head, looking at Jiro Kyoka inexplicably. Everyone is very excited. Li Tian smiled as he looked at the students who gathered to discuss the sports festival. Aren't you excited, Li Tian? With your strength, you will definitely shine in the sports festival, and you will be invited by the top hero's office. Yi Yin also looked at Li Tian excitedly. I don't think so. Li Tian shook his head and said. If it wasn't for the fact that although the Hero Sports Festival received a lot of attention, it was only regarded as a preliminary heroes, and even if it was bright, it wouldn't really gain much popularity. Li Tian didn't even want to participate. Hearing Li Tian's words, Ojiro Mashirao and Shoji Mezzo were speechless. Should I say, Li Tian, that you are indifferent to fame and wealth, or should I say that you have no energy? Ojiro scratched his face and said helplessly. Mr. Li Tian is very similar to Mr. Aizawa, said the mouth that turned into a tentacle behind Shoji. Students, I will work hard. Suddenly, a murderous voice sounded. I'll do my best, Uraraka growled with a murderous look on his face. The other students on the side were shocked by Uraraka's murderous aura, and subconsciously echoed. What's wrong with Cha-Cha? Yi Yin was a little dazed. Haha, student Uraraka is very motivated. Too, you have to work hard too. Then blind everyone's eyes, Li Tian said with a smile. Li Tian's words instantly made everyone in the class quiet down at the same time, and they looked over in horror. Please don't do that, keep an eye out. So, you asked me to come here to ask how to master quirks proficiently. Li Tian looked at Green Valley Izuku and All Might in astonishment. Well, Mr. Li Tian should also know that because I am not familiar with quirks so far, I will hurt myself when using quirks. So, I want to ask classmate Li Tian how to master his quirks proficiently in a short time. Green Valley got rid of it with a serious face. Young Li Tian, your quirks were awakened a few days before the heroic exam. In fact, Green Valley Boy was the same, and he also got the quirks not long before the heroic exam. The shriveled version of All Might also said seriously. The whereabouts of All for One appeared, and soon there will be a decisive battle between him and All for One. Before that, he must make arrangements for Green Valley Izuku as his successor. He has no time to accompany Green Valley Izuku to grow up slowly. Please, Li Tian boy. Li Tian looked at All Might and Green Valley Izuku with serious faces. Although he knew that All Might is not suitable to be a teacher, he was still a little speechless when he saw the number 1 heroes asking such a question seriously. He remembered that he had told these 2 people long ago that after obtaining his super speed force, he could naturally and easily control his own speed, and he had never had the experience of Green Valley, so why would he come to ask him for advice? Is this going to break the can and break it, and treat a dead horse as a living horse doctor? Green Valley, you have used your quirks a few times after awakening. Li Tian sighed helplessly before speaking. How many times? I used it once for the entrance exam, and then it's gone. Green Valley said truthfully after thinking. Li Tian was speechless. If he didn't intervene, All Might's Heroes basic course and the USJ incident, Green Valley would still use it 2 or 3 times, but that's it, the so-called practice makes perfect. You have used quirks twice, how could you become proficient? Li Tian said helplessly. But my quirks will be seriously injured once I use it. Green Valley said quickly. I remember that your quirks in Green Valley are gain-type superpowers, right? Li Tian asked. Yeah, Green Valley nodded. Then you will be injured if you launch quirks, or will you be injured after launching quirks and punching? Li Tian said. Of course it's punching. Lu Jiyu said, suddenly paused, he seemed to understand something. That's it, the strength-enhancing quirks, and the explosive-type quirks that don't increase full power, let you launch, not let you punch. Li Tian rolled his eyes and said, what reason do you think that launching get quirks and get punched out? That's right, All Might suddenly realized from the side, Onforal's ability is to store power, and then increase the power, just activate it but not use it, and it won't cause that kind of injury because it can't be controlled. Is that so? Green Valley was a little surprised, but also a little clear. Of course, this is. Just as All Might was about to speak, he froze for a moment, and turned his head stiffly to look at Li Tian. And LVGU also reacted suddenly, and looked at Li Tian with a face of panic, say, you said it. The corners of Li Tian's eyes twitched slightly as he looked at the master and apprentice. Why did he feel that the scene in front of him seemed very familiar? Since I have said it, there is nothing I can do about it. All Might sighed and looked at Li Tian heavily. Young man Li Tian, I hope you can keep this matter a secret. Secret. Li Tian looked at the master and apprentice in front of him. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly, knowing everything, but he had to cooperate with the performance of the two. He was under a lot of pressure. Besides, secret what? Li Tian pretended to look at the two of them strangely. One for all, is it the name of Green Valley quirks? I am everyone, how could I choose such a weird name? Green Valley and All Might looked at Li Tian's puzzled look for a moment, and then suddenly realized. That's right, Mr. Li Tian doesn't know that All Might's quirks is one for all. So, if you just say the name of my quirks, Mr. Li Tian won't think of anything. Haha. It's because I really want to be a hero, that's why I named my quirks I'm everyone. Green Valley quickly thought of an excuse, and then said with a smile. However, All Might looked at Green Valley with a look of lovelessness. And Li Tian's eyes twitched too. He obviously turned a blind eye when it was time to cooperate with the performance. Why would this happen again? That, All Might's quirks is also one for all. What else could Li Tian do? Continued to act, and then asked with a look of surprise. How do you know? Green Valley panicked. You said it yourself just now. Li Tian said silently, speechless. Green Valley covered his mouth for an instant, and looked at All Might. All Might still nodded slowly with a face full of lovelessness. Looking at the two master and apprentice in front of him, Li Tian was about to go crazy. He almost couldn't continue acting. Now that we've reached this point, we won't hide it from you. All Might sighed. What do you mean? Since he has reached this point, he obviously didn't do anything, so don't talk to yourself, hey. Hurry up and keep hiding it from me, hey. The corners of Li Tian's mouth twitched, screaming crazily from the bottom of his heart. All Might looked up at Li Tian and said in a deep voice, my quirks, named One for All, is a crystallization of strength intertwined with voices for help and brave hearts, and it is a kind of quirks that can be passed on continuously. As for Green Valley, he is the successor of One for All that I chose. All Might said in a deep voice. The quirks that can be passed on, that is, the so-called quirks that can transfer quirks to others. So, Green Valley didn't awaken quirks before Xiangying entered school, but inherited power, right? What else can Li Tian do? Cooperate with the two people in front of him and continue acting. It's no wonder that Green Valley's manipulation of quirks is so rough. Quirks in the body seem to have never been in tune. Otherwise, even if you awaken quirks at the age of 15 like me, the quirks in the body will not be so unfamiliar. Li Tian opened his eyes. He squinted and spoke nonsense. That's right, because this power suddenly appeared in the body of the Green Valley boy, so if it is used in the early stage, it will have a huge load on the body. All Might said. Then All Might, how did you get through this period of adaptation? Li Tian asked suddenly. Me. All Might suddenly trembled all over. His face visible to the naked eye turned livid, showing a look of fear. I was. Was. Quote. Oh, All Might, what's wrong with you? Green Valley looked at All Might, who suddenly became frightened with panic. HMPH. Li Tian snorted twice when he saw All Might trembling. He did it on purpose. How could he not know how All Might passed that period of adaptation? I was trained by the teacher at the time. For a year. All Might said tremblingly. 1 year. Green Valley panicked instantly, and instinctively exclaimed, doesn't that mean that I will spend 2 years or more? All Might, who had been trembling all this time, suddenly looked serious and looked towards Green Valley. Green Valley boy, if you think this way, you are very wrong. All Might said in a deep voice, you have to be faster than me, you have to surpass me. How is it possible? How can I surpass All Might? Green Valley blurted out directly. Looking at the scene in front of him, a cold light flashed in Li Tian's eyes. Green Valley, if you think this way, one for all, you should return All Might as soon as possible. Li Tian said in a deep voice. What? Lu Jiyu was taken aback, looking at Li Tian stiffly, and returned one for all to All Might. Although I don't know the specific composition of one for all Might said before that one for all should have the 2 characteristics of storing power and passing it on to others. Li Tian said in a deep voice. Store power, if you only store your own power, then even if this quirks can make All Might the stored power must contain the power of the previous generation or even earlier generations, right? Li Tian said in a deep voice. That's right. All Might nodded. One for all is a power that can accumulate the power of the first 8 generations from the 1st generation to the 9th generation. So, from the moment you accept one for all, you, Green Valley, must hold beliefs that surpass All Might, because what is contained in your body is the wealth accumulated by generations of one for all heirs including All Might. The powerful force coming out. Li Tian said in a deep voice. The powerful power accumulated by all the heirs of one for all, including the power of All Might. Green Valley looked at his hands and murmured. That's right, if you don't even have the belief to surpass All Might, then one for all, you don't deserve to inherit. Li Tian continued. That, All Might suddenly felt something was wrong. There must be a belief beyond All Might, but there was still a touch of hesitation on Green Valley's face. Green Valley, Li Tian snapped, you who were chosen by All Might, do you want to deny All Might's vision? Since he chose you, then he believes in you and believes that you must surpass him. Quote. All Might believe in me, believe that I can surpass him. Some kind of fire suddenly ignited in Green Valley's eyes. Well, can you listen to me? All Might raised his hand, trying to interrupt the awkward conversation between the two. Hollow down pointing triangle boo. Then, Li Tian looked at Green Valley with a serious face. Can you respond to All Might's trust with your own actions, Green Valley? Use my actions to respond to All Might's trust. I can, Green Valley growled, with incomparable determination on his face. Very well, so what should I do next? Li Tian snapped. All Might, please train me harshly, train me harder than your teacher. Green Valley Izuku stood up straight away, and bowed deeply to All Might heavily. That, Victorian boy. All Might raised his hand, about to speak. Please. Green Valley interrupted heavily. Megid, what the hell is going on here? All Might was about to go crazy, looked at Green Valley in front of him, then thought of the training he had received, and then brought it to Green Valley. I will die, the Green Valley youth will definitely be trained to die. Please. That, please. Outside the door. Li Tian closed the door silently, and hummed softly when he heard the voice coming from the room. It was so hard to bring up the dark history of All Might, and I was interrupted by you before I could take a photo as a souvenir. If I don't fool you, I won't be called Li Tian. Li Tian snorted twice. As for Green Valley's specific training methods, isn't it still early? Let Green Valley experience the training that All Might has undergone before we can talk about it. After being dragged by the master and apprentice for so long, my stomach is almost empty, let's eat. Touching his stomach that was beginning to protest, Li Tian raised his head and chest, and walked towards the cafeteria. In the afternoon, classes are about to start. Mr. Lugu, what's wrong with you? Iida jumped up from his seat and rushed to the door to support the crumbling Lugu. Oh, wood, like wood. LVGU said inarticulately with her face swollen. Student Xiaoju, Uraraka also rushed up after him, and supported LVGU. The other students in the class also rushed over. Green Valley, what's wrong with you? Did the villains attack? Hurry up and inform Mr. Aizawa. No, no. Green Valley, who was supported by Ida and Uraraka, hurriedly stopped the crowd. Oh, the injury is an injury sustained by Su Lien. What? Green Valley, what are you talking about? Speak up. What a villains. You actually hurt Green Valley-kun like this. Ida burst into tears. This effect is really beyond expectations. Even Li Tian, who was the instigator, looked at the Green Valley at the door and couldn't help but feel a little unbelievable. No wonder All Might got scared like that for mentioning Gran Torino and was treated like that for a year. Class is over, what are you doing? Aizawa Shota's low voice sounded. Ms. Aizawa, Midoriya, he was attacked by villains. When everyone saw Aizawa Shota appearing at the door, they hurriedly shouted. Assaulted by the villains. You really want to? Aizawa Shota glanced at Green Valley and said, it's just trauma, but it looks a little scary, and it will recover after a week of recuperation. If you can't wait, after class, you take Lu Jiyu to the recovery girl for treatment. It's all trauma. A group of students were stunned for a moment, looking at Aizawa Shota who didn't care, and Green Valley who couldn't stand still, and felt something was wrong. Mr. Aizawa, what the hell is going on? How did Mr. Midoriya suffer such severe trauma? Uraraka asked hastily. Aizawa Shota's bloodshot eyes glanced at Li Tian's innocent expression, the corners of his mouth twitched, and he said, because of the instigation of a certain classmate in our class, Lu Jiyu found All Might with enthusiasm. I wanted to experience the training that All Might went through every day in high school, and after begging, it became like this. Quote. Ah, everyone exclaimed, looking at the miserable state of Green Valley in disbelief. Because of the bewitching of a classmate in our class. Experience the training that All Might High School goes through every day. Under begging, it became like this. Feeling the strange eyes of all the students, Lu Gu's face flushed instantly, and suddenly the injury on his body didn't hurt so much. It's embarrassing. I don't know if it's because Li Tian's deception skills are too strong, or the training last time was really effective. It was obviously very painful training, but Lu Jiyu managed to hold on abruptly. But, every lunch break after training, Green Valley will go to the recovery girl to recover the superficial injuries. So far, Li Tian only knows about it when he happened to pass by the training ground of Green Valley and All Might. This matter. It was also at that time, after watching Green Valley training against All Might's fists for that week, possibly non-existent improvement, that Li Tian really let go of his playfulness. With a little guidance and the guidance of All Might, Green Valley can be considered to have understood the way of using One for All full coverage in advance, or the real usage tips of One for All. Plus All Might's Hell-style special training. All Might. Green Valley Izuku. Game over. In just 1 week, Green Valley has been able to maintain 5% One for All full coverage to fight. And this speed of progress couldn't help but make Li Tian feel a little nervous. Of course, it's really just a hint of tension. At most, it is just to grit your teeth and use the 100-fold speed increase of the Speed Force mode, and start extreme exercises with ultra-high load and ultra-high intensity in various ways. Bang, bang, bang. On the opening day of the Shangying Sports Festival, it was the sound of gongs, drums and firecrackers. Major TV stations, major private newspapers, various self-media, reporters and cameramen have already arrived at the scene, and the audience and countless professional heroes have also arrived at the audience seats early. And outside the Shangying Stadium, it was also extremely lively, with a tangy aroma coming from the food stalls, and the road between the stalls was also crowded with people. I really want to watch the game. My little nephew played in the student competition area of the first year of high school. On the snack street outside the Shangying Stadium, Mt. Lady in a hero's uniform complained, looking in the direction of the stadium. On the side, the powerful young heroes who is in full swing, Milan Kamui looked at Mt. Lady speechlessly. Obviously the snacks in his hands had already changed to the 7th type. It doesn't seem like you have any intention of going there. Mount. Lady, do you even have a nephew who is studying in Shangying? That's amazing. Death Chiquan beside him said with a smile. Well, haven't I shown it off to you? Mount. Lady was startled instead, covered her mouth and said in surprise, my nephew is the number 1 among the first-year students of Shangying High School this year. You're just showing off now. Milin Shenwei looked at MT. Lady speechlessly and complained. Backstage of Hero Stadium. I didn't expect to wear sports uniforms for the sake of fairness. I'm really not reconciled. It's the first public appearance for Mingming, and it seems to be a handsome appearance. Kaminari Denki said depressedly, lying on the table unwillingly. You just want to be handsome, but I can't wear a uniform, which will greatly affect the combat effectiveness. Yi Yinkai said, really depressed. His quirks are transparent. Wearing a uniform like clothes, there is no way to play the quirks. Me too. Wearing these shoes, can't you run at all? Li Tian echoed Yi Yin with a smile. However, the classmates next to him became extremely displeased with Li Tian and Yi Yin's show of affection and pretending behavior. Green Valley. Hung, who was normally taciturn, suddenly opened his mouth and stopped Green Valley. Classmate Hong, Lu Jiyu, who was calming down his nervous mood, was startled and looked at Hong strangely. On weekdays, he and Hong should have little communication. Objectively speaking, in terms of strength, I am definitely stronger than you. Hong said bluntly. Ah, Lu Jiyu couldn't help being startled, and looked at Hong for no reason. If we were talking about him 3 weeks ago, he would undoubtedly agree to it when facing Hong, but now, he is not like this. But in comparison, All Might's attention to you is not even comparable to that guy Li Tian. He said in a deep voice, turning his head to look at Li Tian. Huh, why are you involved with me again? Li Tian, who was originally watching the show, couldn't help being startled. What is the reason? I don't want to get to the bottom of it, but I will beat you, and you. Hong turned his head and stared at Li Tian. I will definitely beat you. After finishing speaking, Hong turned his head indifferently and left. Looking at the indifferent Hong's back, Li Tian couldn't help being speechless, wondering what to do with him, although he knew that Hong was just having a knot in his heart, and was actually just a lonely boy who was not good at communicating, but psychological counseling, he really not good at it. There is a way to fool Dafa. Sure enough, the protagonist harem group needs to be conquered by the protagonist himself. Li Tian looked at Lu Jiyu, who was already chasing after Hong with a serious face, and sighed, you are really young, and the two love each other. Kaminari, who was sitting next to Li Tian, heard Li Tian's emotional voice, followed Li Tian's gaze curiously, and then looked at the backs of LVGU and Hong, and the corners of his mouth twitched involuntarily. Li Tian, the hobbies of my classmates are really special. He remembered that Li Tian also paired Green Valley and Bakugo in the last Heroes basic class, and this time he paired Green Valley and Hong. Doesn't that mean that Bakugo is green? Kaminari's brain suddenly twitched, and Bakugo looked at the side with weird eyes. Everyone, it's time to enter the venue soon. Please get ready, we're leaving. Class monitor Yaoyorozu Wan girl suddenly came in from the lounge and shouted loudly. Heroic Stadium, a first-year venue. Let's face it, the annual Hero Sports Festival is about to start. The first one to enter the venue is Class A, Grade 1 of Heroes. Mike, the narrator of the Grade 1 field, shouted loudly. Hearing the shout, all the members of Class A who had been preparing in the passage walked out of the passage energetically. With cheers, shouts, and cheers, the atmosphere of the entire venue exploded in an instant, and it was extremely frenzied. Good, a lot of audience. Whether you can show your best strength in such a frenzied crowd is also a necessary quality for a heroes. Li Tian glanced around at the crowd. So, Li Tian worked hard to calm his nervous breathing, and smiled helplessly, I don't want to show off. As an ordinary person in his previous life, how could he have the experience of appearing in front of tens of thousands of people? Although his strength sometimes affects people's mentality, it can't help Li Tian ease his nervousness now. Is Li Tian nervous? On the side, Yi Yin tugged at the corner of Li Tian's clothes and asked in a low voice. A little bit. Li Tian shrugged helplessly. After all, it's the first time to appear in front of so many people, so I'm not very used to it. If it's transparent, I'm very excited. Yeah, Yi Yin nodded heavily, with obvious excitement in his voice. As an invisible person, wanting to attract attention has almost become Yi Yin's instinctive reaction. Chatting with Yi Yin, from other entrances, Class B of the Heroes Department, Classes C, D, and E of the General Department, and Classes F, G, H of the Support Department, and the last Management Classes I, J, and K of the Subject, a total of 11 classes in the first grade have all appeared on the stage. The contestant takes an oath. On the stage in front of all the students, Heroes Midnight, an 18 forbidden girl, made her debut. Well, the dress is really 18 forbidden. Oh, it's the 18 forbidden girl Heroes Midnight, my idol. Putao's nostrils were smoking, and the whole person was instantly excited. 18 forbidden girl Heroes, can she be a teacher in high school? In the student group, someone was obviously destined to be alone. Li Tian from Class A of the first year took the oath on stage. On the stage, Midnight flicked the small leather whip in his hand and shouted loudly. Li Tian. Beside Li Tian, Yi Yin was obviously nervous. When Li Tian was chatting with him just now, he said that he was a little nervous, but now he needs to go on stage. Speak before an audience of millions. Hi, hello. On the stage, Li Tian tested the sound into the microphone. Then, is the view here very good? It's just that there are too many people, and I feel dizzy. This is Li Tian's truth, and Li Tian realized that he was standing on a high place and looking down at the other students below, looking at the size of ants in the distance. The audience, a sense of heroism kept rushing to their hearts. He kind of liked the view. Then I'll cut the long story short, and here I swear, this spot is mine, and the rest of you do your best to chase the remaining 2 spots behind me. Well, that's it. The oath is over. Li Tian grinned at everyone, and then swaggered off the stage. Don't be too arrogant for the fools of Class A. Beat you up. Perhaps it was because Li Tian said it a little more implicitly. Until Li Tian walked off the stage, some of the students below reacted. Li Tian, a classmate of Class A, this is really a subtle and full of hockey declaration. In the radio room, Mike shouted excitedly, even I was stunned for a moment before I realized it. Here, I'm nervous. Yi Yin looked at Li Tian, who walked off the stage with a grin, and couldn't help complaining. It doesn't match Mr. Li Tian's usual style. If it was Mr. Li Tian on weekdays, he would definitely not say such a thing so arrogantly, but would prepare a lot of manuscripts in advance, and then chatter I muttered about it for 10 or 20 minutes, and then Lu Jiyu began to read in a low voice. You really know enough. When passing by Green Valley, the corner of Li Tian's mouth twitched. It was obvious that Green Valley collected his information on weekdays. Actually, I really prepared a lot of manuscripts, but when I stood up, I was so nervous that I forgot my words, so I can only perfunctory. Li Tian shrugged and said. Liar. XN. A group of people debunked Li Tian with one voice. Back in the student team, Li Tian watched Midnight's speech on the stage. I don't know if this competition will be an obstacle race. Li Tian thought deeply. Xiangying should not change the event of the competition just because he is alone. If it is said that the horse riding in the second game may change, but the obstacle race in the first game, the track of that scale, is prepared in advance no matter how you look at it. Heroes as fighting against villains and time all the time, so let's start with the speed to decide the first competition, which is the so-called qualifiers. Midnight's whip with a wave. The huge display screen on the other side scrolled quickly. That's it. Midnight shouted loudly, and the screen froze for an instant. Obstacle race. Obstacle race. The mic in the radio room screamed, and his voice changed a little. This is really. Aizawa Shota couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. Thousands of spectators in the nearby auditorium and those professional heroes couldn't help being surprised when they heard the voice from the broadcasting room. How do you feel that they are surprised by the obstacle race? Obstacle racing. My God, what kind of event is that? Who can beat Li Tian in a race? There is no hope at all. As soon as the competition items were announced, Class A was blown up in an instant, and everyone complained, full of dissatisfaction with the competition items. It attracted the attention of the other classes next to it. Ah, Class A of the first year of the famous heroes department is afraid of a race. A hand knife appeared on Wujian Ningren's neck. Squad leader, Wujian doesn't seem to have a poisonous tongue this time. Ji Ba Ruzao said in a low voice. Oh, is that so? I shot it subconsciously. Kento Kazuka laughed. Guba Ruzo looked at the corner of Kento Kazuyo, who was laughing beside the unconscious Mujian Ningren, and the corner of his mouth twitched, a smile that doesn't care. Terrible woman. Midnight on stage was unaffected by the commotion among the students and audience. The track, with a total length of about 4 kilometers, circles around the stadium and then runs back to the stadium. A total of 220 people from 11 classes participated in a super melee. And Midnight slapped the whip in his hand, crackling, with a smirk on his face. Freedom is the school spirit of our school, so as long as it is on the track, no matter what behavior is allowed. How about it? Do you want me to let you run for 3 minutes first? Li Tian warmed up and stretched his hands and feet, and said to his classmates with a smile. I don't need that kind of thing. Bakugo was instantly fired, staring at Li Tian with a ferocious face. His palms kept exploding, and sparks flew everywhere. My lord, I will kill you with my own hands. The flu. Haha, Bakugo, you still have the spirit. But, is it okay if you don't start? Li Tian laughed, pointing to the people behind Bakugo who had already started running. When Bakugo turned around abruptly, looking at the crowd who had already started running even in the business department, his palms exploded suddenly, and he rushed out immediately. Sneaking fools, die to me. Here we come, the intense and fierce competition has begun. Now the leader is Shoto Todoroki from Class A of the first year of Heroes, and while leading, he also created a lot for other students. It's so difficult. Many people were frozen in place. It was a very intense match from the beginning. Mike shouted excitedly in the broadcasting room. Then followed by Yaoyorozu Wan, who was also recommended for admission this year. No, it was Lugu Izuku who was also in Class A of the first year. Lugu surpassed the girl Yaoyorozu Momo, and rushed straight to Hong, really such a quick move. On the side, Aizawa Shota looked at the agility, and rushed out of the green valley of the passage with a few consecutive leverages on the wall of the passage. A smile flashed in his eyes. This kid, is he finally enlightened? So far, my one for all full coverage can only last about 10 minutes in one breath, and the distance of 4 kilometers is enough. Let's rush over in one breath. Green Valley Izuku made a simple calculation, took a deep breath, and looked suddenly froze. One for all coverage, whoosh. The ground at the foot of Green Valley suddenly cracked, and the whole person directly rose to a height of more than 3 meters, stepped directly on the wall of the passage, and then, suddenly kicked several consecutive vertical jumps, and rushed out of the passage, and, perfectly avoiding the ice floor left by the boom. That's classmate Lugu. The Yaoyorozu Wan girl who was overtaken looked at Lugu leaping past in amazement, her eyes full of surprise. Among the crowd, Kirishima had just hardened and broke the ice on his feet. Looking at Green Valley leaping over his head, he couldn't help being stunned, and then suddenly smiled. What kind of action is Green Valley? So handsome. Has Green Valley overcome the fracture? The other students in class were also shocked, but immediately after, they turned into motivation, using various means, one by one, passed the other students around, and rushed out of the passage. Don't sneak away from me. Yin and Yang face. Coming from behind, Bakugo leapt out of the crowded passage with a powerful blasting real person with both hands. That's Chojiu. Bakugo was taken aback for a moment, seeing the ridiculously fast Green Valley following right behind Hong. That guy is an asshole. An anger that was 10 times and 100 times more intense than Li Tian's ridicule just now erupted from Bakugo's heart, and his whole body exploded instantly. Go to hell. Haha, it's full of energy. Li Tian looked at the scene in front of him from a distance, and couldn't help but feel relieved. Sure enough, only Green Valley can divert Bakugo's attention away from him, the number one. Student Li Tian, haven't you started yet? In the radio room, Mike shouted loudly at the only remaining student in the stadium. Obviously, I said before that I wanted to be the first, but now it turns out to be the last. What did that student think? You're too confident. Isn't there a few students like this every year? Many people in the auditorium also whispered and became noisy. However, even if you have 100% regarded the first place in this race as your bag, you can't be too arrogant, especially for the hardworking students. You can't underestimate it. Mike's voice continued. Come. 100% regard the first place as something in the bag. What is that commentary talking about? The auditorium, who had been whispering just now, instantly exploded. And the group of students who were blocked at the end of the exit passage and couldn't rush out for the time being suddenly turned their heads and looked at Li Tian, who was still in the stadium. Their eyes were suddenly filled with malice, and they had other thoughts. Looking at the scene in front of him, looking at the man in the broadcasting room with a faint smirk on his face, the corner of his mouth twitched. This teacher definitely did it on purpose. You are just doing useless work, Aizawa Shota said calmly. Haha, when I saw Li Tian, I couldn't help but think of your lack of motivation, and then I couldn't help but say that. Mike said with a laugh. Even if everyone on the field joins together to give up the game and try to stop Li Tian, it won't be possible. Aizawa Shota said calmly, curling his lips. As soon as Aizawa Shota said this, there were still many people in the passage who didn't have such thoughts, and their faces suddenly became angry. Is this looking down on all of them? Asshole, who are you looking down on? You don't want to pass here, even if you give up the game, you will definitely be stopped here. Immediately, many people in the aisle stopped pushing forward and turned to face Li Tian. Of course, these people originally didn't have much confidence in being able to snatch the spots from those in front of them, so they simply came up with such an idea. Even if we don't get the ranking, it seems pretty good to be able to unseat the extremely arrogant Li Tian. That guy definitely did it on purpose. Li Tian looked helpless. When did he offend these two teachers? Li Tian looked towards the direction of the passage helplessly. A group of students were full of quirks, and they had already blocked the entire passage. After all, even if they weren't from the Heroes department, these students were elites who passed the Heroes exam, and they all had wearing very good quirks. I still wanted to watch a show here. Li Tian regretfully glanced at the big screen beside him, where Bakugo, Green Valley, and Boom were already in a fight. I don't know what method Xiangying used, but the shooting is quite clear. Then, let's go. On the surface of Li Tian's body, golden arcs danced. In an instant, Li Tian's figure disappeared directly in front of everyone and all cameras. At the exit of the passage, Li Tian stopped with a smile and waved to the students who were still trying their best to build the passage into an iron wall, and then disappeared again. What happened just now? Where's the student? It's so fast, that student's speed is too fast. In the auditorium, most of the audience didn't notice anything, but those professional heroes were stunned one by one, looking at Li Tian who disappeared into the field in disbelief. Even that part of the top, the professional heroes were all astonished. With that kind of speed, it's no wonder that student became so proud after knowing that the event was running. Best Jeanist, whose jacket also looked like jeans, narrowed his eyes slightly and said softly. Hey, that guy is really a student, this speed is too exaggerated. Isn't my title of fastest and strongest going to be taken away? Wing Heroes Hawks, who has always been known for his speed, squatting on the pillar pretending to be distressed and complaining. Professional heroes, it's not just enough to be fast enough. Endeavor crossed his arms, and there seemed to be no waves on his rigid face. Oh, Li Tian, who has almost set the first place for quirks as the super speed student for the first competition, finally started, and surpassed all the students in a short moment, and appeared in the first echelon. Boom classmate, Midoriya classmate and Bakugo classmate are in front of you, but... In the broadcasting room, Mike shouted excitedly. The first obstacle in this obstacle race is about to appear. It is composed of a dozen or so 80-meter-high terrifying robots, robot hell. You three, don't charge forward with all your strength, you still have the intention to fight. Li Tian slowed down and looked aside. The Green Valley Bakugo, which was already in a mess, and the dozen or so huge ones number 0 imaginary enemy. Standing on the iceberg, Hong, who wanted to leap, was blocked by the explosion, and Green Valley, who was jumping up and down, also collided with Bakugo, and every time Green Valley wanted to cross the imaginary enemy number 0 and leave the battlefield, Hong's iceberg would also stop him. The three of them ignored the dozens of robots and formed a chaotic mess, but it was obvious that Green Valley's participation in the battle was being targeted by Bakugo and Hong at the same time, and Hong was also blocked by Bakugo. But even so, the super mobility of the three of them and the terrifying aftermath of the robot battle still blocked everyone else. Scud, don't run if you can. Bakugo was startled suddenly, and then his palms exploded, rushing straight to the slowed down Li Tian and roaring. My ability is to run fast, you told me not to run. Li Tian couldn't help laughing. The speed that slowed down soared again, and then in the world where everything was static, he rode the dust away. Then the so-called robot hell didn't even detect Li Tian's figure at all. Even with the aftermath of the melee between the three, Li Tian's Speed Force world was full of loopholes, and he was easily broken through. Don't run. Seeing Li Tian's sudden disappearance, Bakugo instantly understood that Li Tian had accelerated, roared weakly, and rushed out of the robot hell and the chaotic battlefield with his hands exploding behind him. As soon as Bakugo rushed out, Hong and Green Valley stopped entangled in an instant, and rushed out of the robot hell. And behind the robot hell, the students who waited for a long time and dared not rush out looked at the robot hell where most of the robots had been turned into scrap iron by the aftermath of the three people's attacks, and couldn't help swallowing. 4 monsters. The obstacle race is 4 kilometers long, and there are 3 major obstacles in total. One is a robot hell with a total length of about 700 meters, which is composed of a dozen large robots with a height of 70 to 80 meters combined with countless small robots. Second, it is connected by ropes, and each stone pillar is separated by tens of meters, a super cliff with a total length of 500 meters. And the last third is a section of sandy road about a kilometer long, buried with countless landmines that are not powerful, but the sound of explosions and the smoke are enough. The original first echelon, composed of Bakugo, Green Valley, and Hong has just arrived at the super cliff of the second obstacle. Although the speed of advancement is still amazing, the speed has undoubtedly been slowed down. At this time, Li Tian, who was in the new first echelon, even ran most of the last Lisha road. This kind of speed shouldn't be too noticeable, Li Tian thought secretly while dodging the mines under his feet and jumping forward quickly. Although his current speed looks amazing to the audience in the auditorium, it is actually the result of Li Tian's deliberate suppression. Otherwise, even if he is not wearing special clothes, the shoes under Li Tian's feet can still support Li Tian to run at a speed of more than 200 meters per second. As for the obstacles in the whole process, for Li Tian who has used the speed force, there is not much difference at all. That is to say, if you let go of running now, the entire 4-kilometer track takes up to 20 seconds. Can run the full distance. And now, sprinting past the finish line, after a minute, it shouldn't be very conspicuous. Li Tian thought to himself as he looked at the stadium where cheers erupted suddenly. Appeared, the first place in the first test obstacle race appeared in the second minute after the start, although it was expected, but congratulations to Li Tian, classmate of Class A of the first year in the Heroes department. Broadcasting in the room, Mike shouted excitedly. It's amazing, that kind of speed, even the professional heroes can't match it. Indeed, it completely exceeds the level of students. It's really amazing. Subtlety boy, come on. Win the championship in one go. In the auditorium, looking far beyond the first echelon, who had finished the game, Li Tian exclaimed, especially after seeing the exit on the other side, and the few students who didn't leave the passage. Amazed again and again. Isn't it too conspicuous for a minute? Hearing the cheering cheers from the audience, Li Tian scratched his head helplessly, and immediately forgot about it. Forget it, focus on it, anyway, the first it's impossible to be famous. But, even if it's a bit too early, Li Tian looked at the empty field where he was alone, standing alone under the gaze of tens of thousands of spectators. To be honest, I'm really embarrassed. Ha ha. Li Tian scratched his head and laughed. I can't see it at all. Midnight's mouth twitched slightly, looking at Li Tian who was sitting generously on the edge of the host stage, watching the other people's competition on the screen, and talking to himself for 4 or 5 minutes. Come on, the second place in the obstacle course is coming soon, and he is. Green Valley Izuku. With Midnight's shout, at the entrance of the stadium, a slightly staggering figure of Green Valley ran in. In fact, with his speed, he should have been able to rush over, but... Stop, you. The moment Green Valley crossed the finish line, Bakugo roared, and his hands behind him kept exploding. The whole person rushed over in midair, and Hongyi followed closely behind with his feet on the ice. Here we go, the third Bakugo Katsuki, the fourth Shoto Todoroki. Midnight yelled loudly, flicking the small leather whip in his hand. Shirju, you. Bakugo leaned on his knees and panted angrily, staring angrily at LVGU who crossed the line a second earlier than him and growled in a low voice. Ka-jong. LVGU looked at the angry Bakugo behind him, and there was a papa on his face. Oh no, it was a scared expression. The moment he crossed the finish line, Hong was very calm. He stopped using quirks, looked at his right hand and whispered, mobility is still a bit lacking. Eraserhead, your Class A is really good, how did you teach them? The top 4 are all from your class, and they are all ranked at the top by an overwhelming advantage. Mike in the broadcasting room spared no effort. The atmosphere is hot. I didn't teach anything at all, it's their own strength. Aizawa Shota's lifeless answer made Mike helpless. You guys are finally here. I've been waiting for a long time. I'm the only one receiving the attention of tens of thousands of people. It's really embarrassing. Accompanied by a burst of speed and lightning, Li Tian's figure appeared in front of these three people. Tens of thousands of people. Hearing Li Tian's words, Lu Jiyu glanced subconsciously at the surrounding audience stands, and then froze immediately. Because the first, second, third and fourth names are all here, except for a small part of the audience who are still outside the screen, most of the audience looked over curiously. The broadcast camera was also adjusted to face this side. Taking a breath, Bakugo stood up, glanced at the audience around him, and said, Scud, you obviously don't feel embarrassed at all. Actually, I'm still very nervous, but why can't I be as embarrassing as Green Valley? Li Tian said pointedly. Subconsciously, Bakugo and Hong both looked in the direction of Green Valley, only to see that Green Valley was already frozen in place at this time, out of breath from nervousness. It's so good that I lost to this guy, Chiju. Bakugo stared at LVGU with anger on his face. Huh, seeing Bakugo's attention diverted successfully, Li Tian breathed a sigh of relief. He finally saw someone coming, so he relaxed for a while, and was almost caught by Bakugo again. You seem to be intentionally provoking Bakugo and Green Valley. Hong walked up to Li Tian and asked softly. It's not provocative, it's just diverting attention. After all, we are number one, and that guy Bakugo has been staring at number one, so I'll find him someone who can temporarily ignore me. Target. Li Tian shrugged his shoulders but did not hide his meaning. I see. For Bakugo, this trick is surprisingly effective. Hong couldn't help but think about it. Thinking of the way Bakugo stared at him on weekdays, he suddenly felt that he also needed to learn this trick. After all, it wasn't Li Tian alone. After singing the one-man show, even if he wasn't very familiar with the current troubled boy, Li Tian insisted on chatting. And with the arrival of the first echelon, the students behind also rushed to the scene one after another. After Yi Yin ran over from the 25th place, Li Tian decisively dropped Hong and ran over. How about it? The effect of exercising has come out. Li Tian looked at Yi Yin who ran over with his own strength and said with a smile. Yi Yin's transparent quirks are useless in this kind of competition. Moreover, Li Tian was also begged not to help her beforehand. Yeah, Yi Yin breathed a sigh of relief, and then with a thought, he controlled the transparency of his body to drop rapidly, revealing a half-solid and half-empty figure before nodding heavily and laughing. After running 4 kilometers, I don't feel any pain at all. It will be very tiring. However, I thought Li Tian that you would not be willing to show the limelight. After all, you have always talked about becoming the heroes of the stealth department. Yi Yin laughed. I want to be a stealth-type heroes without conflicting with the limelight. After all, with my speed, as long as I don't stop, even if I appear in front of the camera, then I can be considered a stealth-type heroes. Li Tian shrugged and smiled. Besides, the talk of becoming the number one has been released, so of course we must beat everyone by an overwhelming advantage. It turns out that Li Tian is also competitive. Yi Yin said, looking at Li Tian in amazement, his eyes brightened. What nonsense. Of course I also want to be number one. Li Tian laughed. Because Li Tian, after you awakened quirks, you don't seem to have any competitive spirit, and you talk about becoming like Mr. Aizawa every day, so. Yi Yin laughed as he said. Silly girl, if I'm not competitive, then why would I be number one in the hero entrance examination, and why would I go to such hard training every day? The usual appearance is called calm, demeanor, not indisputable. Strong and competitive. Li Tian couldn't help but shook his head with a smile. Also, Aizawa-sensei is also a very powerful professional heroes. Don't underestimate our teacher. Hey, Yi Yin just smirked and didn't speak. Demeanor, I think it's a black belly. Kaminari squatted aside, whispering to Putao. He came to ask Putao for advice. After all, Putao was stuck to Yaoyorozu Wan's body and carried all the way. Boom, Kaminari lay face down on the ground, with a big red bag shining on top of his head. Putao looked at Kaminari who passed out and trembled all over. Okay, so scary. As the time passed by every minute and every second, all the students who participated in the competition completed the competition, and finally, the qualifiers are over. Heroes Midnight shouted, "Congratulations to the top 42 contestants in the qualifiers who have advanced to the official competition. In addition, don't worry about the eliminated contestants. We have prepared another show for you stage. As for the content of the official competition," Midnight pointed to the large screen that kept scrolling beside him, and the whip sounded. The screen stopped instantly. "That's it, horse racing. The official competition will be held in an hour. All students participating in the competition should return to their seats to recover their strength during this time. Now, the eliminated boys, stand on your stage." Horse riding. On the way back, Li Tian couldn't help raising his eyebrows, although this competition was extremely beneficial to him. But is it the same as the original? Was this arranged by Xiangying in advance? Still is. It seems to be interesting. Li Tian remembered the so-called unchangeable plot that he denied some time ago, and couldn't help showing a smile. I don't know if this incident, that plot can be done well. Come once, the general trend cannot be changed. Hero Academy, a secret meeting room somewhere. It's almost ready to say. Call us all here to do what, Mr. Principal and All Might? Endeavor shouted in a low voice with a straight face. This hour is the stage for those eliminated students, and now it belongs to the stage of the winner. Everyone, the official competition is about to start. Now, I will announce the rules of this horse riding competition. On the stage, the leather whip in the hands of the 18 forbidden girl heroes Midnight slapped, excited. "Oh no," the whole person seemed excited. Participants are free to form a team of 2 to 4 people and make a horse riding posture. It is essentially the same as a horse riding game, but there is one difference, that is, according to the results of your last round of competition, each of you they are all assigned specific points, starting with 5 points for the 42nd place, and adding 5 points for every one step up, all the way to 200 points for the 3rd place. Excuse me, what does the score of 205 for the 2nd place mean? Isn't the score for the 1st place and the 2nd place 210 and 205 points? Iida suddenly raised his hand and asked loudly. It's really easy to use. Bah, what a young man. Midnight pointed at the whip in his hand and said with a grin, "This should have been the 1st place in the last game, but in this game this is a special honor, but considering the strength of Li Tian, who was the 1st student, with the special approval of the principal, the score of the 2nd student Lu Jiyu, who should have been 205 points, was changed to 1 million points. Li Tian, who got the 1st grade, scored 10 million. 1 million points, 10 million points. As soon as the 2 scores were exported, the faces of everyone present changed, staring at Li Tian and LVGU who were standing in the crowd. Fortunately for Li Tian, after seeing that kind of speed, there are only a handful of people who still have the hope of sneaking up on Li Tian to get points. Therefore, more people's eyes are all focused on those who will definitely advance if they get the same score. Green Valley's 1 million points. The higher the ranking, the easier it is to be targeted. This is a competition for survival. However, it is best not to play Li Tian's idea. This is a friendly reminder from all the teachers. Midnight winked at the students in the audience. The competition time limit for horseback riding is 15 minutes. During this period, the points held by each group will be worn on the rider's body with a bandana fixed by tape. At the end, the sum of the points of each group's bandana is final score. Then disband now and start to form a team freely. 10 minutes later, the horse riding battle will begin. Li Tian, who was lying innocently on the gun again, was speechless when he saw Teacher Midnight who was deliberately provoking trouble on the stage. Did this group of teachers negotiate to find trouble for him? He and Xiangying have no enmity. 2. This time you have to team up with me, otherwise no one is willing to team up with me and enjoy this kind of charity victory. Li Tian looked at Yi Yin pitifully and said. Yeah, Yi Yin wanted to hesitate at first, but when he noticed his surroundings, he stared at Li Tian fiercely. His eyes contained the gazes of alluring sluts who wanted to rush over to team up with Li Tian can't help but tremble, and then quickly nodded in agreement. If only 2 to 4 people are needed to form a team, then the 2 of us should be enough. I don't think other students would want this kind of victory. Li Tian said after thinking. I want. Pu Tao shouted crazily from the side. However, students will definitely want to reach the final with their own strength. Yi Yin nodded in agreement. I've said it all, I think. Pu Tao burst into tears instantly. Why don't you just ignore him like this? Don't even think about it. Xiaomin Tian, Li Tian will not let you and Yi Yin Chan come into contact in this kind of competition. Well, it's because of your past style. Asui swung his knife down neatly. Grape. Oh. While the students were looking for their teammates nervously, on the other side, the doors of the heroes' classrooms of the various professions in charge of the first-year arena gathered together. This year is really unbelievable. There will be a student of that monster level, and even the principal has to change the rules for him. The cement department said in a naive voice. Who said it wasn't? That kind of little monster. As long as it completes the basic qualities required by professional heroes and starts a real career, the light it blooms will definitely be dazzling and unbelievable. Midnight couldn't help it either. Said shaking his head. It's like All Might, added the cement division. Marksman sighed and said, although becoming a student of Xiangying is destined to be filled with endless thoughts of unremitting progress and endlessness, for that kind of light, chasing in vain will only exhaust you. Learning to give up is also very important for heroes sometimes. But that's exactly how it is. At this time, the people who can continue to forge ahead and pursue endlessly will be very precious, won't they? Number 13 said with a light smile. All the teachers present couldn't help but looked at each other and laughed. The smile was extremely complex, with longing, loss, resentment, bitterness, relief, etc., which could not be described in words. Complex emotions merged into a complex smile. And in the hour before that, no one knew that it was in a secret meeting room in the Hero Academy. The previous chapter has been changed. It's almost ready to say. Call us all here to do what, Mr. Principal and All Might? Endeavor shouted in a low voice with a straight face. Look carefully, inside the lounge. Mr. Principal, All Might, and Aizawa Shota from the Heroic Academy, as well as the top professional heroes Endeavor, Best Jeanist, Hawks, Ikashoot Paper Sharpshooter and the police's Mound Ne Jungji and several other police officers all gathered in this lounge. The thing is like this. Mr. Principal stepped forward and said, a month ago, our school was attacked by an organization that claimed to be the League of Villains. Afterwards, the police discovered the League of Villains through a reformer left behind by the other party. The mastermind behind the scenes. League of Villains. Behind the scenes. There are small villains organizations and behind the scenes things. Hawks couldn't help laughing, and said jokingly, Mr. Principal, what do you mean? The mastermind behind the League of Villains needs us to join hands to deal with it. No, All Might interrupted, his face extremely serious, I can only fight against the mastermind this time. All Might. Endeavor's flaming eyebrows frowned immediately. If anyone present knew All Might best, it was undoubtedly him who had been chasing All Might all his life. This expression of All Might. Is the villains difficult this time? Endeavor asked in a deep voice. It's tricky. All Might nodded, and said heavily, in the era of extraordinary dawn that just opened the curtain of the Quirks era, it became the darkest villains organization in Neon. The most evil and dangerous villains. Could it be? Best Jeanist suddenly remembered something, and he was startled. All Might, that person you mentioned was once known as the creator of darkness in the Dawn Age. As soon as the words came out, the teasing smile on Hawk's face disappeared, and Ajiziot's expression also changed slightly. As professional heroes, even if they have not experienced that era, they still have some understanding of the darkest existence in that era. The darkness before dawn is always deep and terrifying. League of Villains, the backstage of such a small organization with a cheap name, can there be such a dangerous person? The paper sharpshooter said incredulously. Actually, 6 years ago, that villains organization was on the verge of complete destruction, and most of the villains had been secretly sent to prison, and the leaders of the villains were also fighting with Mai in the battle. He escaped with almost incurable serious injuries. All Might said in a deep voice. Since it is a serious injury that cannot be cured, how could the other party come out to make trouble again in those 6 years? Endeavor said in a deep voice. Some time ago, the captured transformed man had super regenerated quirks, and the quirks of the villain's leader was named All for One. Its ability was to take away other people's quirks and give them to themselves. Others also relied on this quirks, so he became the ruler of evil, in that era when the supernormal was just emerging. All Might said in a deep voice. Since the opponent's reformers have super regenerative quirks, he himself must have obtained super regenerative quirks. Therefore, the injury status of the opponent is unknown, the ability of the quirks is unknown, the number of quirks is unknown, and the power is unknown, but what is certain is that the opponent's combat power is extremely strong, and only All Might on our side has the confidence to counter the opponent. So, what do you mean? Best Jeanist said in a deep voice. Our police have accurately grasped the opponent's 3 secret bases, one of which is the League of Villains' base of villains, one is Nomu's production plant, and the other is most likely Alpharon's hideout place. Tsukauchi Masaru said straightforwardly. Therefore, a certain number of top heroes' troops are required to attack in 3 directions with our police to subdue League of Villains and destroy the Nomu factory, while Olmert goes to the place where All for One may be hiding and takes action against him. But the biggest problem is that the other 2 venues, All for One, may also be located. Therefore, if something unexpected happens, you need to hold on until Olmert arrives. Hold on until Olmert arrives. Endeavor clenched his fist suddenly, his eyes filled with extreme unwillingness. But he nodded heavily and agreed with several other top heroes. As qualified professional heroes, sometimes, even if they are not reconciled, they must control their behavior, because what they bear is not only themselves, but also the heroes. These 2 words. Seeing that everyone agreed, All Might also heaved a sigh of relief. What happened this time really needed the cooperation of the top professional heroes. Not against All for One, but to evacuate the crowd. None of the 3 bases they controlled was a sparsely populated area, and even the place where the mastermind All for One was located could still be regarded as a prosperous area. If you want to fight in such a place, the ability to evacuate the crowd is essential. However, All Might's heroes' office's function of evacuating the masses is seriously insufficient, and the police cannot intervene at the beginning. After all, the evacuation of the police and the evacuation of professional heroes are not the same concept, and they will definitely be noticed, arrived. In addition to its own strength, every top professional heroes has a top heroes firm and an excellent team behind it. These are what are needed most at this time. Takauchi-kun, leave the rest to your police. All Might asked Tsukauchi Masao seriously. Leave it to us. For this matter, we have already arranged a full month in advance. Except for the top professional heroes just now, even the other professional heroes who acted together, I don't know the inside story of this incident, nor do the police. No one knows the purpose and location of this operation, and all possible possibilities have also been taken into account. So, let's go. All Might, Tsukauchi said with a smile. Time is efficiency, time is money. All Might once said that an expert is a race against the vicious villains and time all the time. Although it is only a reserve, but as the future heroes, the young heroes present have already realized this point. Almost within a few minutes, the 42 people present had already been divided into teams, and 14 groups of people were already standing at various positions on the field, looking at the surroundings with intense eyes, ready to go. With Yi Yin on his back, Li Tian glanced at the teams in front of him that haven't changed much, and almost couldn't help but think wildly again. Very good. Midnight on the stage looked at the people below who had been ready in less than 10 minutes with a smile on their faces. I like the students of your class. Now that you are ready, let's start the competition. Snapped. Midnight swung his whip and shouted, everyone, get on your horse. Everyone. All horses. Yi Yin on Li Tian's back looked at Midnight on stage with black lines all over his head. This was definitely on purpose. 3 approximately 2 to 1, the game begins. Come on. 10 million points. Surround him, prevent him from running, and steal 10 million points. Take 1,000,000 points from this side. Don't run away, classmate with 1,000,000 marks. The moment the game starts. There were 2 trends on the field, that is, respectively besieging Li Tian with 10 million points, and Green Valley with 1 million points, and not besieging the 2, but mixing in the crowd and preparing to fish in troubled waters. There are so many people. Li Tian couldn't help laughing as he looked at the group of classmates rushing around. In addition to some students in Class B, Li Tian even saw Bakugo, who was carried by Kirishima, Ashido and Shiro Hanta, roaring and rushed over. Get ready to run. Li Tian's super speed and lightning flashed instantly, and the world in front of him suddenly paused, and everything was still. Then he leisurely walked out from the encirclement of 4 or 5 teams around him. With a belt of 10 million points, Li Tian, who is destined to be the first, has no need to compete for the score belts of other students. So, each team has one belt, I'll take it away, as an apology for attacking me. Li Tian turned around and exited the Speed Force mode, smiling and waving at the 4 or 5 teams that came back to their senses, then trotted out. That fool! Bakugo looked at Li Tian with a leisurely expression, and couldn't help roaring. Bakugo, it's better to change the target to Green Valley. If Li Tian wants to find a chance to sneak attack, if he takes the initiative to contain it, there is no hope at all. Kirishima, who was on the front leg, persuaded. I know. Bakugo grinned ferociously, but if you don't become the overwhelming number 1, wouldn't it be interesting? Green Valley and the Scud Fool are all my prey. But, what about the points? If we don't get Li Tian's points in the end, and we don't have enough points, we won't be able to enter the final. Ashido couldn't help but said. Then let our score be enough. Bakugo said directly without thinking. So, how do you get enough points? The 3 horses were speechless. Suddenly, Bakugo waved his hands, and the violent explosion instantly blew him away, and flew straight towards the other Team B that surrounded Li Tian just now. Take them all. What? That team was still upset about the points that were taken away by Li Tian. Bakugo's sudden attack undoubtedly made them unresponsive, but when they reacted and prepared to counterattack. Whoosh! Bakugo's body suddenly felt as if it violated the laws of physics and then withdrew. At this time, they saw something like adhesive tape attached to Bakugo's back. Asshole Bakugo, I told you to say it before you take off. Shiro Honta shouted dissatisfied. Good catch, this score is enough. Bakugo grinned, and a ferocious smile appeared on his face. Let's keep going, the first place is ours. It's really enough. Regarding Bakugo's temper, even though they had prepared themselves before forming a team, the 3 of them couldn't help being helpless, but they rushed out excitedly one by one. First place. They want it too. Are you full of energy? Li Tian carried Yi Yin on his back, easily dodging the attacks of the surrounding students. This group of students is more motivated than he imagined, and there are still so many people besieging him, trying to snatch the 10 million score belt. And in this half day, Li Tian also saw many interesting quirks from other classes. For example, the 3 groups of players who can soften the ground, spray cement, spray glue, and want to trap Li Tian. There are also quirks who control the 2 horns to sneak up on his dead corner and want to take the score tape directly, and quirks who want to use the dense vines to stop his pace and wait for the opportunity to use the vines to steal the tape. Even the students in Class A couldn't help rushing to Li Tian's side at certain times, trying to snatch Li Tian's belt, such as Putao trying to throw sticky balls around Li Tian, trying to grab Li Tian's belt. Try to stick to Li Tian. Lying on Li Tian's back, Yi Yin's neck now has 7 or 8 score tapes, which Li Tian casually grabbed when he passed by those besieged teams. Looking at the salivating eyes and ready to move hands and feet of every team around, Yi Yin said with a light smile, it's different from what I imagined. I thought they would all go to catch Lu Jiyu, but they didn't come to catch us. Woolen cloth. Well, no matter what, I came to this arena because I wanted to become a hero. How could I surrender without a fight? If I was in another team, I would definitely not give up on taking my points. Think about it. Li Tian said with a smile. Of course, Yi Yin said with a chuckle, if you snatch 10 million points, you will be number 1. How could you give up? So, Li Tian shrugged with a smile. Hey, but I will never give this belt to anyone. Yi Yin touched the 1,000-point belt tied on his forehead with a smile on his face. This is Li Tian's number 1. Quote. It's our number 1. Li Tian laughed. You fool. Several teams surrounding Li Tian looked at Li Tian, who was talking and laughing with Yi Yin, and couldn't help but gritted their teeth and glared. During the half day of the siege, they didn't even touch the 10 million tapes, even their own tapes had been snatched away. However, compared to Li Tian's leisurely, on the other hand, Green Valley, who has the same treatment as Li Tian, is far less relaxed and freehand. Even if Green Valley can now use one for all full coverage, but sitting on a horse, his own mobility is far from being able to use it, and the power of 5% full coverage has not reached 100%, which is like a hurricane wave degree. Therefore, the current Green Valley team can only rely on the mobility of the horse to dodge and Tokiami's shadow to dodge. Moreover, under the pursuit of a powerful team like the Boom team, there have been many flaws, and the auxiliary equipment on his body has also lost its function under successive attacks. Green Valley, do you want us to keep the tape with 1 million points for you for now? Li Tian couldn't help but teased when he passed by Green Valley with Yi Yin. When the game is about to end, we still need to pay attention to it. Here you go. No need. Lu Jiyu directly refused without thinking, looking at Yi Yin on Li Tian's back, with a gleam in his eyes, and said in a deep voice, however, for Mr. Li Tian's 10 million points, we also very interesting. Haha, I have 1 million points, and I'm still staring at my 10 million, how greedy. Li Tian changed his steps again and again, and easily dodged the attack of the black shadow sneaking from a blind corner. Go. Now that he understood Green Valley's tactics, how could Li Tian not guard against the existence of the shadow? It's over half the time, but the score on the court has not changed yet. Li Tian and Lu Jiyu in Class A are still far ahead with 10 million and 1 million points, while the third and fourth place it's still Bakugo and Boom. Wait, when did the third place actually become the Object Room team of Class B? The Boom team became the fourth place, and the Bakugo team became 0 points. No, there are a lot of 0 points, except the top teams. Most of the teams in Class A and Class B have already reduced to 0 points. When is this? This is simply too exciting. In the broadcasting room, Mike shouted excitedly. So that's how it is. Aizawa Shota looked listlessly at the chaotic battle below and said, in addition to staring at the teams with 10 million points and 1 million points, there are also many teams that have set their sights on the team early on. Those other teams. So that's how it is. It's a really good idea. Mike pretended to have discovered it, and praised. Time passed by every minute and every second, and the battle on the field became more and more intense, and there was only 1 minute left before the end of the game. And the current score on the field is 10,1130 points for Li Tian, the first team. The second-placed Green Valley team scored 1 million points. Back to third-place Bakugo team 1360 points. The fourth-placed H team scored 850 points. 2. Are you ready? Li Tian looked at the last remaining minute and turned his head to ask. Are you really going to do this? Yi Yin asked hesitantly. Haha, of course. Didn't we agree that the last minute belongs to us? Li Tian laughed. But, Yi Yin still hesitated, but he couldn't hide the look of expectation in his eyes. Okay, start to move. I'm going to start running. Li Tian said directly. Yi Yin finally nodded heavily and made up his mind. With a thought, the translucent words that had been maintained all the time were reprogrammed to be transparent, and then the transparent Yi Yin gradually appeared again. However, compared with the translucent reality, the Yi Yin that appeared this time was more similar to the texture of glass. Feeling the excitement of Yi Yin on his back, Li Tian twitched his mouth. It started. Wow! All the audience present were in an uproar and exclaimed. Everyone turned me blind. Yi Yin, who was on Li Tian's back, looked like a human-shaped sun at this moment, shining brightly, and becoming more and more dazzling. And Li Tian's speed also increased rapidly, and he shuttled around every corner of the arena with Yi Yin on his back. Dazzling brilliance stretched across the city, covering the entire arena, causing the audience in the stands to close their eyes to cover it, and the entire arena in front of them exuded a dazzling light. But compared to how dazzling the spectators were in the stands, the other players in the arena wanted to scold their mothers right now. Dazzling brilliance was everywhere around them. There were tears in the corners of their eyes, and they didn't dare to open them at all. In their ears, they were filled with curses from the audience, and it was difficult to hear other voices. Stop the light quickly. Is that guy a beast? Amid the brilliant brilliance and the cheers of the audience, the whispered cursing and yelling of other teams were completely inaudible. Sorry everyone, this last minute belongs to us. Hearing Yi Yin's excited shout behind him, Li Tian grinned. After a full minute, the light dimmed until the end of the game, allowing everyone in front of them to regain their sight. In the broadcasting room, Mike caressed his brown eyes and whispered into the microphone, young people nowadays really know how to play. Then, Aizawa Shota's voice came over the radio. After today's competition, Li Tian, Yi Yin, you two will clean up my class for a month. Li Tian and Yi Yin, who were originally smiling happily, froze suddenly. What's the situation? In the broadcasting room, Aizawa Shota was dripping eye drops into his own eyes. His eyes, which were originally scarlet and bloodshot, were extremely red now, and there were still obvious tear stains in the corners of the eyes. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.